Good evening, everybody. It's 6:01, so we'll get this meeting started. Um, Welcome to the Proud Listener. Have we started recording?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so first up, we have approval of the agenda. May I have a motion to consider the agenda?
Second.
Okay, thank you both. Is there any discussion on the agenda? Anyone, any questions, proposed changes? No? Okay. In that case, let's have a vote. All in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye. Aye. Great. Agenda is approved. Let's move on to future board items and tours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Folks, my name is Allie Rhodes. I serve as Director of Parks and Recreation for the City of Boulder. And this is the part of the meeting we give an overview on upcoming PRAB topics and meeting dates so that the board members can prepare. It's also where members of the board can suggest topics for the agenda committee. And tonight I have some really timely updates for folks. So a couple just calling out that we have our annual maintenance closures happening at North and at South later this in August. And then coming in hot are the 2027 budget conversations with PRAB and with City Council. So you all will dive in tonight to understand the fee policy. And then in August, you'll get a draft 2027 fee schedule. On August 31st, the city manager will release the draft 2027 budget. The PRAB will discuss that at your September meeting. City Council will explore the budget deeply at a study session on September 10th. September 10th is all things budget at the City Council study session. They will then consider the budget for a first reading and public hearing on October 1st. We anticipate approval at a second reading and public hearing on October 15th. Also note later in the meeting, we're hoping to talk to you to schedule a CIP tour for the 2027 Capital Improvement Program. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sally. Let's move on to public participation. This portion of the, sorry.
I just had one question looking at the future board items. I think one of the things we had, at least in a limited group, talked about maybe adding to one of the future meeting agendas was the BCAC multi-sport facility update.
Dana, thank you for...
You had said August.
Thank you for flagging that. I see it's not noted on the agenda, but I will make sure that it is. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Dana. Okay, so public participation. This portion of the meeting is for members of the public to communicate ideas or concerns to the board regarding parks and recreation issues for which a public hearing is not scheduled later in this meeting. That includes the consent agenda. The public is encouraged to comment on the need for parks and recreation programs and facilities as they perceive them. All speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Depending on the nature of your matter, you may or may not receive a response from the board after you deliver comments. We are always listening and appreciative of your community feedback. Clerk said you have some additional guidelines to share, please.
The city has engaged with community members to co-create a vision for productive, meaningful, and inclusive civic conversations. This vision supports physical and emotional safety for community members, staff, and board members, and upholds democracy for people of all ages, identities, lived experiences, and political perspectives. You can find more about this vision on our website and in the Boulder Revised Code. The city will enforce the rules of decorum found in the Boulder Revised Code, including participants are required to sign up to speak using the name they are commonly known by. Online participants must display their full name before speaking. Currently, only audio testimony is permitted online. No attendee shall disrupt, disturb, or impede the orderly conduct of any board meeting in a manner that obstructs the business of the meeting. All remarks and testimony shall be limited to matters related to city business. No blocking the aisles in violation of the fire code or in a way that obstructs the vision or audio of other audience members. No signs or flags are permitted in the meeting room, except for one per person that is no larger than 11 by 17 inches and held no higher than the person's face. We ask that you not affix items to the podium, dais, walls, or other surfaces. No participant shall make threats or use other forms of intimidation against any person. Obscenity, other epithets based on race, gender, or religion, and any speech or behavior that disrupts the meeting will not be tolerated. In-person participants are asked to refrain from expressing support or disagreement verbally or with sounds such as applause or snapping, with the exception of declarations. Traditionally, support is shown through American Sign Language applause or jazz hands. And really quickly, I'll show you our advanced sign-up list so you can see about when you'll be called. And if you haven't signed up in advance, you can sign up in person over here on the sign-up sheet. And take it away, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thanks, Clarissa. I do want to, before we get into the public comment, we do have quite a few people this evening. The PRAB received a lot of emails in the last several days about the Spruce Pool being closed, and I just want to equivocally state that is not being discussed. We love the pool as much as you do, and it is not being discussed at this board or the city council or anywhere else. With that, let's welcome Catherine Sindveld.
My name is Catherine Sundvall, speaking as the local coordinator for the Boulder Botanic Gardens project team. Today I'm here speaking to where we are at in our proposal writing process. Since the last hearing, we are going through the instructions that Tina Dalton sent, and especially on how to incorporate our Cheyenne tribal consultations with what we find insufficient in the ethnographic report. Before I go further, I need to give you a brief understanding of my background for a perspective of why we are struggling with this report. Professionally, I've worked since 1995 as a cybersecurity governance, risk, and compliance analyst for many global companies who are operating locally. These include StorageTek, Sun Microsystems, Oracle, Google, Medtronic, and most recently Tallgrass Energy. To standardize and support cybersecurity assessments, NIST put out a document entitled NIST 800-53 with standardized language, objectives, and methods so that all analysts can reference the same regulations and requirements in practical ways when evaluating new and unique situations. So what does NIST 800-53 have to do with the city's ethnographic report? As the local coordinator of an Indigenous-themed botanic garden project, I've been struggling with the omission of essential information in this report. We have been unable to use the report for guidance. Instead, we have been working with other cities, especially Broomfield, for historic information about East Boulder and support with tribal consultations. I invited Tina Dalton to attend a Denver meetup with me, and she initially said yes, but then she didn't make it. There I talked at length with Southern Cheyenne Chief Brian Whiteman, who explained that the regular tribal members cannot speak for the chiefs, and what happened in East Boulder is a matter for Chief Phillip, who, because he's a direct descendant of Chief White Antelope, he carries the stories in his oral family history. You already have his in-person testimony on March 23, 2026. My question now is for help with our proposal is how to include consultations we have already done with the city or with the city of Broomfield in our proposal. How does the city use testimony recorded in various public hearings to update the ethnographic report? These are some of the questions we have right now so that we can move forward with the ethnographic portion of our proposal. Later on, you're going to hear from Dr. Marquis Lecomte, who is going to describe further from an ethnographic point of view how to remedy the situation.
Okay, next up we have Lynn Stein.
Hi, everyone. I'm here to talk to you again about Spruce Pool. Some of you remember me from last year. Some of you remember from 2012. This old Spruce Pool shirt, which predates some of your time. I've been living in Boulder for 35 years and swimming at Spruce almost daily in the summer when I'm here. There's a lot of us here, and I know a lot of us have been writing you. If you're here for the pool, just stand up quickly, because not everyone who's here with pool sports is going to be speaking Just wanted you to see that. So I'm not going to talk at length about what I love so much about Spruce. You'll be hearing from lots of people, but it's lovely. It's quiet. It feels safe this year for the first time. I have an injury. I haven't been able to do all my other exercises, so I'm there every day. But I really appreciate that I can get in a pool lane and not worry about being run over by other swimmers. We love Scott too, and Scott's different. Scott's a water park. It's noisy. It's chaotic. There's fast people in lanes. I used to be one of those fast people. I hope to be one of those fast people again, but right now I'm not. But even more than that, it's really a community. And we all know there's a loneliness epidemic going on. There aren't enough places where people can just come and feel seen and welcome. And Spruce Pool is that. I mean, I used to arrange to meet friends there. Now I don't. I just walk in. I know that either I will see people there I know, or I will meet people there I know. And universally, people come in looking kind of haggard and look at each other and sort of give this sly grin and then jump into the water. And we go, oh, heaven, we're back. Please keep this pool open. And I'm not just talking about not selling it. I'm very relieved to hear that the rumor that we heard about selling the pool was not in anyone's plans, but it also needs to be kept open and open long hours. I would hope that it could be kept open full hours through August and into September, given that North is going to be closed from August 1st through sometime in October. I know Parks and Rec is under budget pressure. I know the city's under budget pressure. And yet it seems to me that there must have been guards already scheduled, people who are counting on that income to pay their salaries. So guards must exist. So I'm just asking if it's possible to keep the pool open for longer this year and for full hours next year and coming years. We also talk about 15-minute neighborhoods here in Boulder, and having everyone who wants to swim outside go over to Scott in September is not really a 15-minute neighborhood. Finally, it's a lifesaver on these hot, hot days. There's still plenty of people in Boulder who don't have air conditioning, or we try to cool with outdoor air, which is getting harder and harder. And being able to go someplace where you can cool off, where kids coming out of the pool are actually shivering. I mean, what a delight and a public health necessity on these hot days. So we all want to work with you. We know there's budget issues. How can we help you get more people in, advocate for more money for Parks and Rec from City Council? Thank you.
Okay, Angela McCormick, please. Angela?
Hi, I'm Angela McCormick, and I'm a 45-year resident of the city. And clearly, I spoke to Lynn before I came, so I'm probably not going to read from my notes because I'm going to second like every single thing you said. But you know, so I took swimming lessons here as a young person. My hair was brown, and Spruce swim lessons made me the swimmer I am today. I didn't have a collegiate or a high school background. And I just want to reinforce that I really appreciate that it's not an overly programmed pool like Scott is. And I swim at Scott sometimes, but it's a different caliber of swimmer, and that's great. But Spruce is for folks more in my lane. And I know so many people there. I have met so many people who then I know cross-sectionally, you know, from all my years here. It is a third place for people to go in the heat and relax. And I have spoken to a lot of people there this summer who don't have air conditioning, and they go there daily to hang out in the shade and dip in the water and be there other than in their hot condo or in their hot apartment. I guess lastly, I'd just like to say that all of our community amenities in town, our parks and pools and playgrounds, provide a lot of value by strengthening our community. They improve our public health, they enhance the quality of life for us, they create connection, and we really need that stuff. It's very, very valuable. And lastly, I want to say thank you for your service. As a surviving twice board member for the city of Boulder, I know how much time you put into this, and thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thanks, Angela. Hannah Lanner?
Good evening. I just want to say how grateful we are to have the facilities that we have in Boulder. And Spruce Pool, since 1981, is a neighborhood pool for me. has been a haven. It's a pivotal place in our community. It is very unique, as you've heard. There are huge differences between that pool and Scott. I tore my ACL and I've been rehabbing for the last couple of years in Spruce Pool. And it's nice to know that the people who are there are conscious and aware. And in Scott, people are just like fast swimming, and that's really all they care about. In Spruce, we pay attention to each other because we are a community and we are connected to each other. And so we also support each other in times of grief, in times of loss, in times of sickness. We really are there for each other. We reach out to each other at other times during the year, not just during the summer. And a lot of the friendships that I've made from specifically being at Spruce Pool are people that I'm connected with in the broader community and as a citizen in the community. It's also 25 yards, and that's helpful. Scott is 50 meters. And I run in the pool. There are lanes specifically for running. A lot of us run in the pool, and a lot of us run together and socialize and connect. So we really do want to know how we can support the city in funding and allocation specifically for Spruce Pool. What can we do? How can we support? Because we're here with you to play that role. And so if you can make suggestions for what we can do, we do want to hear that too. So thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thanks, Hannah. Let's have Dr. Margaret Lecomte, please.
Good evening. I'm going to be pooling with the two people who follow me, Nancy Egbert and Emily Reynolds. So I am Dr. Margaret Lecomte. I'm speaking in favor of constructing a botanical garden near South Boulder Creek, honoring the North Cheyenne people who camped and lived there and considered it a special and sacred site. The city wants the garden to be informed by ethnographic reports of the indigenous land use commissioned by the city of Boulder. My interest in this project is twofold. The first is because I am an ethnographer. I've taught ethnographic research methods for 33 years, including 25 years at the University of Colorado. I've personally conducted and directed many ethnographic studies, many with Native American populations, and I've directed multiple doctoral dissertations that focused on Native American people. My approach to ethnography is addressed in my 11 books and many articles and book chapters on how to conduct ethnographic research, plus innumerable technical reports and ethnographic analyses on the projects that I've conducted. I've been honored with a Lifetime Award by the American Anthropological Association, and my books have been translated into several languages and used all over the world. My second interest is in supporting the cultures of Native Americans and their efforts to overcome hundreds of years of dispossession and efforts to totally erase any evidence of their existence by white people and the U.S. government. One of the catalysts for the Botanic Garden is the land declaration on page 3 of the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan. It encourages collaboration with and respect for Boulder's first indigenous inhabitants, people who still maintain a presence in our community. So I reread it. It's a powerful, if aspirational, statement. I also was given the city's ethnographic report. It was distributed by the city manager. Allie Rhodes of the Parks and Rec Department told supporters of the Botanic Garden to use it as a guide for designing that garden. It was, we were assured, the ethnographic report, so I read it. And I was very puzzled. In my professional opinion, that 18-page document was not a professionally produced ethnographic research project. Why? Because the hallmark of any credible ethnographic research is first, its comprehensive focus on the people who are being studied, and second, its rich, highly detailed description of the history, culture, language, stories, ways of living, and belief structure of the people who play, raise families, what they eat, how they use the natural resources, plants and animals in their surroundings, the ceremonies they engage in, and how the environment and external forces have affected them. This document included none of that information. While it did just list the ways in which the data were collected, interviews, observations, collections of historical documents, it was completely missing any descriptive information, the complete reason for doing an ethnography. Instead, it also focused only on the Arapaho, not on the Northern Cheyenne, who actually lived in and used the land of concern for the garden project. Moreover, its section on the importance of Native sovereignty was full of errors and completely missed the historical and current trauma experienced by Native peoples whose lands was stolen by the U.S. government and white settlers. That experience, repeated many times for most Native Americans, ripped them from their homelands and turned them into despised refugees. This cultural reality still affects all Native Americans. It was more a report about a report than an ethnographic report, and I wondered who could have written it. Something had to be missing because in its current form, it was useless. So yesterday, I tracked down the researchers who conducted the study and requested a copy of the complete report. And I got it yesterday morning, a 95-page document from the chief investigator. What the city manager had circulated as the report was only its introductory pages, and even those were poorly edited. 3/4 of the report, all of the real ethnographic content, was missing. The complete report, which I read, is a professionally done job. However, even it is biased by overwhelming use of Arapaho informants. It's a crucial omission because its almost exclusive focus on the Arapaho and other tribes erases the voice of the Northern Cheyenne, the people who actually lived along the South Boulder Creek. There is not even a mention of Chief White Antelope of the Northern Cheyenne, who brokered peace between white settlers in the Valmont area and its displaced Northern Cheyenne inhabitants. He was far better known than Chief Niwot of the Arapaho. He was so well known at the time that President Abraham Lincoln recognized him for his efforts with a peace medal just before he was murdered at Sand Creek. It was he and his followers who met, camped, and had ceremonies in this particular piece of land on South Boulder Creek. Just a few weeks ago, traditional Chief Philip Whiteman, the great-great-great-grandson of Chief White Antelope, and the current cultural spokesperson for the Cheyenne tribe, told the Parks and Rec Board just what this land meant to his ancestor and to him. Other Northern Cheyenne have also testified to this meaning. So I was very puzzled to hear Allie Rhodes declare minutes after Chief Whiteman's eloquent ethnographic testimony that she had, quote, seen no credible evidence for any cultural significance for this piece of land, unquote. This statement contradicted what the internationally recognized expert on what constitutes cultural significance for the Northern Cheyenne had just described for her. She then forcefully stated to the supporters of the garden, you understand that the tennis courts will go forward. It's a big piece of land. Maybe the garden could share it. Such a dismissal of the plan for the garden violates the spirit of the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan statement, to which this city government often pays obeisance. Moreover, a heritage garden is a place of peace, meditation, and ceremony. Scientists tell us that its users, sacred animals, and plant inhabitants, cannot coexist with the noise, light, and commotion of daily racket sports. There are many possible sites for tennis courts, but a sacred site cannot be duplicated. Building a tennis complex instead of a garden on this site would be a travesty. Please reconsider and please prioritize the development of a botanic garden honoring the Cheyenne people. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. Matt, also
Mr. Chair, can we please ask Emily Reynolds and Nancy Egbert to raise their hand for the record? Since they pulled time. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next up is Michelle Wolf. And just to let people know who's coming after that, we have Deb Skavaron and Grace Thompson. Oh, okay. So then Deb Skovanron, thank you. And after Grace, we'll have Sarah Mallon.
Everybody gets it wrong. I am going to talk about three things briefly. I've lived in Boulder for 45 years, And I want to lead by thanking everyone here. I'm board president of a nonprofit and especially appreciate the work of staff and board members in a governmental or nonprofit setting. It is the only way that healthy communities can thrive. So thank you. I have been swimming at Spruce for 25 years. And it's a great source of rehab for my back, like most people who express this ineffable when they get in the pool. A lot of it is because we're an aging population and need these kinds of regular rehab facilities. I am going to give you kind of a different snapshot that I think is also important. At Spruce Pool, the little kids pool, splash pool or whatever, is full of grandparents and parents and little kids that are too little for Scott Carpenter. And it occurred to me the other day that instead of sitting in front of screens or having to go to camp or be programmed for activity after activity, a lot of these kids just have the great joy of spending the afternoon in a little pool that fits them. And I just thought, what a gift for families and for those kids. So thank you. That's what makes us a healthy community here in Boulder. And so again, I would love to partner with you and advocate as things come up. And here's to a successful next year as you negotiate the budget. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So let's have Grace Thompson, and then following her will be Sarah Mallon, and then Amelia Dickerson.
My name is Grace Thompson. I'm not a swimmer, just I'm here for pickleball. So Boco Pickleball has been losing memberships over the last 4 years because of the city's lack of performance and just a general feeling of hopelessness. I'm very happy to report that Tom Watson has actually broken ground. I mean, I was there and took photos. I was so excited. And there's plans for improvement at South Boulder Rec Center. So thanks. I mean, that's really important that I get that message across first. My role in BOCO is with members and with court. We have some court monitors that go to the courts and check them out and make sure that everybody's happy and everything's running well. And so I reach out to them to see what their needs are on an ongoing basis. And over the years, we've been asking for 8 courts of open play at South Boulder Rec Center multiple times. We were able to get 6 courts of open play on the weekends. I want to say 6 months ago. The city came through with that, which was huge. And so now we have 6 courts open play on the weekends in addition to weekdays. But the open play and the way it is set up, all courts need to be open play and not 1 or 2 courts available for reservations. It just doesn't work. If somebody shows up with a reservation and everything else is open play, there's confusion, and then people have to intervene, and then there's contention. It just doesn't work. So I feel like there's other places people can go for reservations, and when there's open play, just have it open play. When it's reservation, just reservation. So that's my 2 cents, and we've been asking for that for a while. Kira was nice enough actually to come out on Memorial Day weekend and witness what was going on. And I think she spoke at the last meeting. I saw that there were some notes on that, and I appreciate that. But she saw that there's a need. This weekend, there were 30 paddles waiting to play on a given day. It's just too much. So that's enough about South. And North Boulder Rec Center has a similar problem going, but in the evenings, it's been really interesting. They actually have more than 30 paddles out at a time on Wednesdays and on Fridays. So we'd like to request that there's another open play night added on Sunday, because there's such a need. Now, this may all change once Tom Watson opens. The need might not be as extensive, but it's unbelievable how many people are waiting to play pickleball. And then the other thing I wanted to make sure, that's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And we did get your note, so thank you for submitting your comments that way. Okay, so next up we have Sarah Mallon, followed by Amelia Dickerson, and then Judy Emery.
Hi, my name is Sarah Malene. I am the outreach connector for people with disabilities. I was also the community connector for people with disabilities for the Primos Park project. I like Spruce Pool because it's quieter than a lot of other larger facilities that we are blessed with in Boulder, therefore making it more navigatable for me as a person with a disability. It's smaller than it's smaller than Scott, and also I see people I know. I can walk there and I can get there myself. I also like Spruce Pool because it is less overwhelming than a lot of other places. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Next up we have Amelia Dickerson, followed by Judy, and then Deborah Fryer.
Thank you. Okay. Hi, I'm Amelia Dickerson. Thank you very much for listening to us. I just wanted to talk a little bit about Spruce Pool, but also in the context of the importance of having a wide variety of facilities versus consolidating facilities. So Spruce Pool is where I go both when I'm injured and trying to avoid injury. So I'm not a regular swimmer. I don't swim fast. So I'm very intimidated by Scott Carpenter Pool. Also being blind, I need to be in a lane where I'm sharing it with one other person versus swimming in circles. It's really hard for me to do being blind. So that's part of why I don't go to Scott Carpenter and I go to Spruce Pool instead. Rats, now I'm blanking on stuff, sorry. So the way that I would get to Scott Carpenter Pool involves walking on the Boulder Creek Trail, which I don't do in Scott Carpenter Park. It's too many cyclists, it's not safe, cyclists are out of control, that sort of thing. So that's another thing that kind of makes Scott Carpenter Pool off limits to me. So those are just my reasons why it's really important to have a wide variety of facilities. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Judy Emery.
Hi, everybody. My name is Judy Emery, and I am a board member with the Boca Pickleball Club. I've been here many, many, many times, and I'm here because I'm happy. You have put a lot of smiles on a lot of people's faces. On behalf of the board, on behalf of the membership, and just the pickleball community in general, we are thrilled that Tom Watson began. So we want to thank staff, all of you, and anybody else who's been involved. And we are committed to continue to work with the staff as we roll out implementation, meeting programming hours, open play like Grace was talking about. I was so excited, by the way. She took pictures. I took movies. I mean, it was so much fun to see the cranes out there and stuff. So I'm here to say thank you. And then also, it's my understanding that South Boulder is going to be resurfaced here soon. And so want to thank you for that too, because that was another request that we made of this group and others. And again, if there's any way we can help with the staff or anybody in the implementation, please let us know. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Judy. Next up, we have Deborah Fryer, who will be followed by Paul Harney Soderman.
Hello, I'm Deborah Fryer, and I'm a very passionate fan of Spruce Pool. And first, I just want to thank each and every one of you for everything that you do to make it available. I know that sometimes the boiler breaks and sometimes, it's closed for lightning, and I really appreciate everything you're doing with your text messaging and keeping us in the loop and keeping it open. It's our happy place. We wait all year for it to be open. And, right? I mean, this is really like it's our office, it's our therapy, it's our healing place. There are so many people who use Spruce Pool who are swimmers, and they are swimmers with various conditions that make Spruce a place that feels really safe. People with knee surgeries, hip replacements, back surgeries, MS, visual impairments, neurodivergence, traumatic brain injury, long COVID, the list goes on and on. And as other people have said, Spruce feels like it's a place that feels really safe. Last year, I shared that I had a double hip replacement and I still have nerve damage. So I'm really grateful that there's a place like Spruce that's not a competitive, an aggressive place to swim. It feels really chill and relaxing. So I want to thank everyone for keeping it open and also wishing that it remain open for many, many years to come. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then Mr. Paul Harney. Excuse me, Harney Soderman.
Evening, everybody. My name is Paul Harney Soderman. I'm here to speak about the potential of a botanic garden and a memorial and near the East Boulder Rec Center there, right? The reason I'm here tonight is my ancestor was General William Selby Harney, who had a very intimate relationship with the White Antelope family. He committed a massacre in Nebraska where white antelopes, one of his sons was killed. We know White Antelope was killed at Sand Creek, but Harney then went down and signed a treaty at Medicine Lodge, Kansas, and met White Antelope's other son, who refused to shake his hand. So I'm here tonight just to say that I've been living in Boulder for over 40 years. And this is my home. I consider that. And I heard what Chief Philip Whiteman did at that site based on dream and vision, and I believe him. I believe that that place was occupied there, and I've been there as well. I've done other things. My ancestor was the third signer of the 1868 Treaty of Fort Laramie as well. And recently his name was on top of a mountain in the Black Hills. For some reason, the center of the Black Hills, the heart of their home and the home of their heart of the Lakota people. And a few of us went to Washington, D.C. It took a while, but we worked hard, and that name of that mountain has been changed to Black Elk Peak now. And the items that they took from the massacre site in Nebraska were at the Smithsonian Museum for 170 years. And 1 year ago, they were returned to Ash Hollow, Nebraska, and they're there safe and sound now, and the Lakota people will decide what to do with that. Anyway, when I go to places like that, I can feel it in my blood. And I've been hanging out with the Lakota people and the Cheyenne people and the Arapaho people for 40 years now as well. And so I've been a bit of a reverse assimilated, they say, right? And but I really appreciate you guys being here tonight. I know you have a big job to do. I sure would love to see a botanic garden in Boulder, Colorado, and maybe somewhere in there, a little tip of the hat to the original inhabitants of this amazing place, right? And appreciate that very much. So please consider that in your future plans. I don't know. I see a lot of tennis courts, By the way, I want to thank you for Stasio softball fields. I played there for 15 years and didn't even and survived. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. That concludes all of our pre-signed up in-person comments. We'll move to virtual, and then we'll just make sure there's no one in the room who doesn't want to speak, who didn't sign up. So Clarissa, do we have Don, CJ, Yvonne, and Larry on the line?
Yes, they all are.
Great. Okay, so let's start with Don Burgle, and then we'll go to CJ, and then Yvonne, and then Larry.
Hi, this is Don Burgle. I'm the president of the Boulder Tennis Association, BTA. I assume you can hear me. Is that
Yes.
yes?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. So I'm not here as usual to just ask for tennis courts, but I'm actually here to review the letter about the environmental impact of the latest tennis tournament is having on Boulder. And I know that there are a handful of tennis folks here to show support in the audience. If I can just ask them to raise their hands and identify themselves, that would be great. While they're doing that, let's talk about the Austin Scott Tennis Tournament, which we just ran and completed our 58th year. Because the Boulder Tournament's home courts, which were the RMTC Millennium and the CU South courts, have been demolished for other developments. BTA holds the event out in Longmont. And luckily, the Longmont Parks and Rec Department rents their beautiful 10-court facility to us to host the tournament. But in the spirit of reducing carbon emissions and automobile trips on our roads, I calculated the environmental cost of forcing the Boulder community to drive out to Longmont to play and run this tournament. Given our objective for carbon neutrality, for 15-minute neighborhoods and fewer automobile trips, we have to recognize the result of closing facilities here in Boulder and forcing Boulder residents to drive outside the city. In 1 week, the Austin Scott Tournament generated over 1,100 individual car trips between Boulder and Longmont, and nearly 18,000 miles of driving between Boulder and Longmont. We had 376 participants playing multiple times in 8 days, and at least a third of those come from Boulder and the others from the rest of Boulder County and surrounding communities. We had volunteers coming out each day to set up, work, and tear down the tournament. And despite the loss of local facilities, our participants continued to rise. So the city actions to demolish those courts resulted in 1,100 extra cars on the diagonal, driving 18,000 miles. City Council and PRAB must recognize that the actions to demolish but not replace have an environmental impact directly in conflict with stated city objectives. We love the court system plan. We want you to execute it. And what we're asking for is urgency, Parks and Rec urgency, to let us recreate here at home and not on the highway.
Okay, thanks, Don. Next up, we have CJ. CJ, you can go ahead whenever you're ready.
Now can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. My name is CJ Joplin Jack, and I live in Gun Barrel. I am 72 years old and partially disabled. I am speaking in support of keeping the Spruce Pool open now and into the future. Spruce is not just a swimming pool. It is a sanctuary and a community gathering place. It has a unique, peaceful ambiance and is the only public outdoor pool in Boulder that caters to senior and disabled swimmers, as well as families with small children. In stark contrast, Scott Carpenter is like a water park. It is very noisy, crowded, and filled with highly competitive swimmers and teenagers who tend to be rude. Parking there is next to impossible. I have been enjoying Spruce since I moved to Boulder in 1997. I have many fond memories of swimming there, with my late husband and grandchildren. One particular memory stands out. My husband was killed in an accident on June 26th, 2010, at age 61. As you might expect, I could not sleep at all that night. The next morning, I asked myself where I could go to find some comfort that I desperately needed. I realized the one place I wanted to go was the Spruce Pool, and I arrived there before it opened. As I sat on the bench by the front door, I looked up at the eastern sky and had a beautiful, clear vision of my husband dancing on a cloud. It took my breath away. I never will forget it and never have experienced anything like it again. I do hope my story will convince you what a special place Spruce is. I have no doubt many others have stories similar to mine. The Spruce Pool truly is a healing sanctuary and simply must be preserved. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yvonne? Yvonne, you can start speaking whenever.
Hi, good evening. My name is Yvonne Bennett, and I am speaking on behalf of the Reimagine South Boulder Rec Advocacy Group. Over the past several years, our grassroots effort has brought together over 4,000 residents who share one simple goal: ensuring the South Boulder Recreation Center maintains its core amenities that our community depends on. We know the city faces difficult financial decisions, and we recognize the importance of a successful bond measure. And we want that measure to succeed if the ballot language clearly guarantees and states that South Boulder Recreation Center will be rebuilt with its core amenities, including a 6-lane lap pool, an indoor double court basketball gym, an outdoor full-size soccer field, dedicated strength training and cardiovascular fitness, and dedicated group exercise classrooms, along with tennis, pickleball, and volleyball courts. Our advocacy group will enthusiastically support the ballot measure if the city includes specific language. We will mobilize our volunteers, communicate with our thousands of supporters, and work to help educate voters on why this investment matters. Our community isn't asking for something new or extravagant. We are asking for a commitment that residents will not lose the amenities that they have relied on for generations. Specific ballot language provides certainty for voters. It builds trust, unites our community, and gives residents confidence that the promises made today will be fulfilled in the future. We stand ready to be partners in passing this bond measure. We simply ask that the ballot language reflects the commitment to preserve the core recreation amenities that make South Boulder Recreation Center an essential part of our community. Please reach out if you would like to chat in more detail. And thank you for your time, your consideration, and for all that you do for our city.
Okay, thanks, Yvonne. Finally, we have Larry McKeough. Larry, are you with us? Clerk says he muted.
Larry, it doesn't look like you're muted, but we can't hear you. I'll reset it. One moment.
Okay, while we're sorting out that technical issue, we have a couple of in-person signups. Why don't we start with Mary Gorman, if she's ready?
Hi, my name's Mary Gorman. I'm a longtime Boulder
Sorry, one
resident.
second, Mary. Closer, can you please start the time? Go ahead, Mary.
I'm a longtime Boulder resident. I started swimming at Scott Carpenter in 1968. Might have been before some of you were born. I took life saving at Spruce Pool in 1971. I became a lifetime swimmer from those activities and continue to enjoy using the pools, especially the outdoor pools. And I'm happy to hear that Spruce Pool will remain open through Labor Day. However, opening Spruce at 11 a.m. is when the sun damage time is highest. And several of us would prefer to swim in the early morning hours that match the current hours. Limited pool hours also reduce potential for revenues. And I'm noting that you can't count usage nor earn revenues for Spruce and North Boulder Rec if you don't have the pools open. So just trying to help you do some of the math, you need to have facilities open in order to earn revenues and count usage. And so I appreciate everybody's efforts to come up with creative ways to keep the pools open. It's really hot. Climate has changed. September can be some of the hottest days beyond July and August. So I really appreciate if you can keep the outdoor pools open for us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Clarissa, did we sort out the technical issue with Larry? Not yet.
It looks like he should be able to talk now.
Larry, are you with us?
Larry, we're not hearing anything.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, there you go. Okay, go
Yay.
ahead.
Too many buttons, I guess. All right. Good evening. My name is Larry McKeel. I've been involved with Boulder Aquatic Masters
Clarissa,
open
timer, please.
water swim program at the Boulder Reservoir since 2007. Over the past 19 years, I've had the opportunity to work alongside many Parks and Rec staff members. I know they have a difficult job balancing the safety, maintenance, budgets, and the needs of thousands of visitors. I appreciate those challenges and the work they do. Tonight, I'd like to offer a broader observation. Organizations like Boulder Aquatic Masters aren't asking the city to provide our program. We provide it ourselves. We bring volunteers, coaching, safety, support, and the community. Last year alone, our volunteers donated hundreds, if not thousands of hours to help over 4,100 people safely enjoy the reservoir and the freedom that the open water swimming offers there. What I'd ask the board to consider is how we can make it easier for community organizations like BAM or many of the other groups that have even spoken this evening to partner with the city. Over the past few years, what I've noticed from a pattern standpoint is that individual decisions that are made for good reasons, whether or not related to safety, operations, access, or administration, can unintentionally create small barriers for volunteers and participants. Each one seems minor on its own, but together they add up and create friction. Some swimmers have told us they're attending less often because the experience has become more difficult than it used to be. In a community with countless recreational opportunities, those small barriers matter. I don't believe this is unique to swimming. We've recently seen similar conversations involving cyclists and other recreational users at the reservoir. The common thread isn't the specific issue, it's the importance of engaging community partners early and looking for solutions that achieve safety while also encouraging participation. As you look towards the future policies and the budget process, I'd encourage the board to ask one additional question. How does this decision affect the volunteers and community organizations, along with the residents who are helping to expand recreation in Boulder? When we reduce unnecessary friction and involve community partners early, we strengthen volunteerism, increase the participation, and ultimately make better use of the wonderful recreation facilities our city already has. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have a couple more in-person signups. Connie Mansour.
Good evening. My name is Connie Mansour. I just want to voice how I appreciate all you have been doing for racket sports in Boulder. Really appreciate the resurfacing of tennis courts, the the attendance to broken nets, and signage to help preserve our investment. I'm here tonight because I want to voice a concern about an unintended use of tennis courts that's going on right now, especially at night. I have observed groups of kids, teenagers, using tennis courts as soccer fields and thereby destroying the nets. The straps of the nets are broken on some courts in East Boulder. And just today on my way down here, they were playing soccer at Martin Park in this tennis court. And I know those nets aren't cheap. They might be cheaper than building a designated soccer field for, pickup games for soccer players. But another thing I did see in the past year, some people use them as dog runs. I've seen feces on the courts from dogs. I've seen skid marks from bikes, e-bikes or whatever, that they go at night and they play on the courts. I'm very invested emotionally and socially in tennis and other paddle sports in Boulder, and it just breaks my heart to see our investment being abused in this way. Thank you for paying attention to this.
Okay, thanks for bringing our attention to that. Can't quite read this name. Is it Jean Bond? Jer Bond? Oh, sorry, Gita.
And this was completely spontaneous on my part. So I'm speaking for Spruce Pool because back in the early 70s, again, when some of you are probably not even born, I was a WSI there. And I'm just providing a little levity here. I came in one day and there used to be a diving board over the deep end. And Marilyn Bone, who was the head WSI there, was sitting on the edge of the diving board with a cast on her leg. And I was like, Marilyn, what did you do? And she said, I fell off my clog. So anyway, I also have been swimming at Spruce since the 70s and was head WSI at Scott Carpenter in the 70s as well. And my kids learned to swim there. And now that I'm officially old, I swim there a lot with my cohorts. And anything you can do to save it, to have it be off the chopping block would be appreciated. And thank you for your time.
Okay, Barbara Steinmetz.
Hi, I'm Barbara Steinmetz. Thank you for all your attention to, and I don't want to repeat some of the accolades of Spruce Pool. I just want to tell you that the visionaries here in Boulder were really something to build a pool, not only for lap swimmers, but for little kids where parents can safely take their children to a large area where little kids can swim and not be in the way of the lap swimmers who are swimming fast and who possibly are endangering or frightening little kids. I'm almost 90 years old. I swim at Spruce Pool every day. I swam 2 days in a row, 1 mile. I wouldn't be able to do that in another pool. The sense of safety and calm at Spruce is amazing. In a community where there are more older people who are water walking, who are using the pool in the summer for exercise, Spruce is the perfect place. And I do understand and have been frightened about the temptation of using that fabulous piece of property for other purposes. And it has come into my mind for several years, and I've been worried that the city might want to trade that wonderful piece of property for something that is more lucrative to the city. But this is a unique town. We have our open space and we keep our open space. We know how valuable it is financially. Spruce Pool is also a wonderful piece of property. Imagine people having put a pool in the center of town, accessible to all the people in our community, easily accessible, where they don't have to drive so far, where the older population can drive safely and feel safe at the pool. The lifeguards and the people manning the pool have been great, and the sense of community continues long after the pool is closed. There are relationships with people, and during the pandemic, I want you to know that some of these relationships that were formed at the pool kept people from being lonely because they checked on one another, even though we didn't go to the pool. And then when the pools opened again, everybody is just thrilled and happy and welcoming. Thank you for listening. Thank you for taking care of us.
Okay, so let's go to Aaliyah Gondor.
Tennis. I was not actually planning to do this, so a little off the cuff, but I want to start by saying how I really feel for the Spruce people and the community that they've been talking about, because that's what we get with tennis. And just today, I have a group of probably 30 older women I play with. I'm 61 and I'm probably one of the younger ones in the group. I'm playing with, late 60s, 70s, 80s. They're inspirations who show me what, how healthy tennis is and what a lifelong sport it is. So the community aspect is, we feel that in spades. I also play with younger women on leagues, some of whom are here tonight. We're having to split our leagues because of the court situation, like, a few matches here, a few matches here, which kind of undermines the whole community aspect of the leagues as well. So that's a little frustrating. I really hate that we are now pitted against the indigenous community for our tennis courts. That sucks, just to put it, bluntly. I would like them to know our situation. We've lost 15 courts at RMTC. And
could you get just a little closer to the microphone?
We've lost 15 courts at RMTC, including the only indoor public courts that we had access to. We've lost 12 courts at CU South. 100% of South Boulder Rec has gone to pickleball. 50% of North Boulder Rec has gone to pickleball. 20% of East is pickleball. So I'm thrilled that the pickleballers are getting courts, but I think you need to understand that, we've lost a lot and we're feeling it in our community, and tennis is not declining. Tennis is still growing. I also want to reiterate Don's comments about the environmental impacts. I personally, as a volunteer at the Austin Scott tournament, drove back and forth to Longmont 5 times, which is not a nice experience, especially with all the construction going on. During the winter, I now drive 2 or 3 times to Longmont to be able to play in the winter because, the indoor courts in Boulder are essentially private. So I just want to keep this. We're here. We've said over and over that we want to work with you. So please work with us. We need courts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then we have an online comment from Everett Smith.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hey everyone, my name is Everett. So my intention tonight is to just demonstrate why Miss Sunville's plan for a botanic garden on the Hogan Pancos property is highly aligned with the Boulder Comprehensive Plan. So in the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan, it explicitly states, the city of Boulder recognizes that those now living and working on these ancestral lands have a responsibility to acknowledge and address the past. We must not only acknowledge our past, but work to build a more just future. We are committed to taking action beyond these words by initiating meaningful action to help support Indigenous nations, communities, and organizations. And so the desecration of historic land through the building of tennis courts does not uphold this vow whatsoever. And while I don't believe that your intent This action implies that you would rather pave away history as if it never happened. The Botanic Gardens, however, fulfills their pledge word for word, inspiring education and initiating meaningful action to help support Indigenous communities. To acknowledge and address the past requires confronting the painful realities of local history, including the legacy of the 1864 Sand Creek Massacre and the tragic loss of Chief White Antelope of the Cheyenne Nation. This botanic garden bridges that historic divide. Designed as a living truth and reconciliation project, it turns the city's commitment into action through the means of reconnecting Cheyenne members directly to their ancestral lands. It promotes Cheyenne culture by using the Recreation Center to host Cheyenne dance, music, traditional arts, and educational youth exchanges. And it's also a means of shared space for the people of Boulder to become familiar with Cheyenne ways and an opportunity for the Cheyenne to become more involved and interconnected in their own culture. Establishing this project on Hogan Pancos creates an enduring cultural monument, like as in a place that promotes a sense of shared meaning and connection. And in terms of economic sustainability, this land was annexed in 2019. Its explicit legal purpose was stormwater control and flood mitigation. From a sustainability perspective, the garden is the most viable choice for the physical landscape itself. The Hogan Pancos site faces complex groundwater and water table conditions, and paving concrete for tennis courts risks exacerbating local flooding. A botanic garden works with a natural water table as a flood buffer, directly advancing the comprehensive plan's goals for regenerative agriculture and soil health, protecting habitats and ecosystems. So in conclusion, Botanic Gardens fulfills the promise of the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan, honors the Cheyenne people and ancestors while leaving a legacy the entire community can cherish for generations to come. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else in the room who has not addressed this who is waiting to? Okay, then we can move on. Ali, I'm hoping you can respond to a couple of things. First of all, I'd love for you to give us an update on Spruce Pool, where we're at with the plan for hours for the rest of the summer, as well as any other comments you may have about usage or future plans for the property. If you have any updates on the proposed or the proposed botanical gardens, we'd love to hear that. And then we have an update in the consent agenda about tennis courts. Would you mind speaking to those 2 points?
I'll start with courts and botanic gardens, and then our Deputy Director, Scott Schuttenberg, will speak to Spruce Pool operations. So just to say out loud, make sure everyone's on the same page. I know folks heard some updates on the pickleball courts. We are under construction at Tom Watson. Those courts are on track for completion in November. And I want to just speak to the comment on tennis. We know that both pickleball and tennis are growing in significant numbers, which is resulting for competition for the courts. Adding the courts at Tom Watson should relieve pressure everywhere, and we'll be monitoring closely to adjust usage as that happens. And then we had been holding off on a full-scale refurbishment of the courts at the South Boulder Rec Center pending an upcoming project at that site. Given that that's years away, we have funded the resealing of those asphalt courts. That's happening in August. And we just want to acknowledge that is a short-term fix on expansive clay soils. Those are asphalt courts. They will crack again. It is a short-term use of money until we can do the better, which is fully rebuild them on that post-tension concrete. So that is our courts update, or I guess for the East Boulder Community Park Courts project and the Botanic Gardens, I'll say similar to messages to what we have been saying. In fulfilling the 2024 court system plan, we evaluated properties across the park system. There are, in fact, limited sites in the city's park system where we can add tennis courts. East Boulder Community Park is one of them, and we are proceeding with plans to develop tennis courts and turn the existing courts into dedicated pickleball courts. That is under design. It will move into site planning and have full public review with the planning board and potential for additional review by other bodies. At the same time, I'm aware of members of our staff continue to coordinate with Catherine and others to provide a route forward for this botanic garden idea. We've not received a proposal. We know that Catherine's working different angles and options. Our team is responsive to every single question and every single email. So that was courts. Was there another one?
Just Spruce.
Spruce, that's going to be Mr. Schuttenberg.
Thank you, Scott Schuttenberg, Deputy Director. I'm really excited to share that we are going to be keeping Spruce Pool open this year until Labor Day. We're excited to be able to have those hours from 11 a.m. till 6 p.m. And after Labor Day, of course, South and East will be available, and we're continuing to work on the pool at North, and hopefully that'll be back online soon. But because of the mechanical systems as well as staff, a lot of our students, our staff are students, and they go back to school, and it gets harder and harder to schedule those staff. We will not continue beyond Labor Day for Spruce Pool. Part of that is the pool was built in 1963, so it is an older pool, and as temperatures fluctuate, that system is not designed to handle temperature changes quite as well as the newer technology at Scott Carpenter. But with South and East being open as well, I think there are plenty of opportunities for folks. The other thing I want to highlight is Scott Carpenter will go to a short course, so there'll be 20 lanes available. And we do feel like people will be able to have safety as they go out and swim and participate. So thank you.
And Scott, this short course, that's the same thing we did last year, right?
That's the 25 for the folks who 50 can feel far. I get that. I also, so the other piece I just want to highlight is similar to, I love how Whole Foods points out, you know, if you don't want to be in the crowd at 5:30 p.m., we know Scott Carpenter Pool is slower from 9 to 11 a.m. and 1 to 3 p.m. in the afternoon. And so even with 20 lanes, if you want to ensure a quieter experience, of course, to the speaker who is concerned about kids, they'll all be in school on the weekdays. And those are the quieter times of the day at Scott Carpenter.
Okay, members of PRAB, I'd love to see if you have any questions or thoughts. I do want to highlight that this agenda item was budgeted for 45 minutes, and we've spent 1 hour and 15 on it so far. So consider your questions carefully. Dana, do you have any comments or questions?
I just wanted to say thank you to all the speakers tonight. I know it's sometimes hard to get up and give your opinion in front of a crowd, so that is amazing. And for the ladies that spoke tonight who are athletes who are 70, 80, and 90 years old, I know what your secret is with all the exercise, and you all look spectacular. So thank you for that. I had a question for staff about if a resident sees misuse of a court, is there a number to call or something they can do to report it? Or
Yeah, I mean, here's the challenge. We do have, that is the type of thing that the Urban Ranger program could address. That number, you can just Google City of Boulder Urban Ranger. We have 4 rangers for our entire system, and they do not work in the evenings. And so they're not going to be able to respond on the spot if you see that type of misuse. It's pretty hard to enforce. If you see it repeated at a location like one of the recreation centers, it's a little easier. But it's not the type of thing that our police force is able to deal with. They just, they prioritize their calls based upon life safety and risk to people and property and this type of thing. I don't think they have the capacity to respond to. It's tricky.
Okay. And then lastly, I was wondering if you wanted to take an opportunity to speak to the ethnographic study and some of the information that Dr. LeCompte had given regarding the shortened version or anything like that.
I made a note to follow up with the experts on our team who worked with the tribes on that. And then I was going to follow up with Dr. LeCompte directly because I was listening carefully and making notes.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to echo the comments about you all coming out here. It's amazing to hear your stories, and I really appreciate, what Jenny was talking about, you all being at your age that you are, and I am very close, but being at the age that you are and being so healthy and appreciative of our pools and tennis courts and pickleball, et cetera. So thank you so much for coming. It makes a difference to hear your stories. I think I feel like I'm missing something. What started the rumor that Spruce was closing? Because I did notice in the board packet there is language at this time. We're not doing anything at this time. So I just was wondering, is there some reason that there's so much concern about Spruce being closed or purchased?
I've been joking. People thought things were boring in the city of Boulder. Like, I have no clue where it came from. I've asked folks. It doesn't make any sense to me because I'm not aware of any plans. The at this time is just an indicator. I'm careful to make claims about in perpetuity in the city's plans, not knowing anything. I'm the director of Parks and Recreation. I'm aware of zero plans to sell Spruce Pool.
Okay, great. That's awesome to hear then. Zero plans. Everybody heard it here. Okay. And then, yeah, I guess just following on to the ethnographic report, I would love to read it myself. So I don't know if that can be shared with the board. But I am, continuing to be, I'm just a little concerned about, as Aaliyah said, pitting, I think, Alia, sorry, Alia, I've even put an accent over the A. I'm concerned that there is this perception of pitted, the native tribes versus the tennis community, and that shouldn't happen. And I don't think anybody wants that. But I don't quite understand what we're doing to try to help bridge any potential conflicts. Because I know a few months ago when we first started talking about this and we started hearing from the tribal representatives, my concern was we were about to issue the RFP on the tennis courts. And at that time I asked, is it possible that when the RFP gets issued that we have language in the RFP so that people who are going to be responding and working on the court development, that they are hyper aware of this other issue that's going on in terms of light sensitivity, impacts to the environment, et cetera. And so I guess I'm just asking, what if anything are we doing to try to address the fact that we're moving forward with tennis courts? We still keep hearing concerns about the sacred, these being sacred lands, being environmentally sensitive. Is there something that we're trying to do to try to bridge that potential conflict or a number of conflicts?
I think I would first just a word of caution of assuming that because they're still concerned, it's due to a lack of effort or due to something happening that isn't being done well. What I believe is, and that I've heard, Catherine say is that she believes that courts and any gardens or things are completely incompatible at this site to have both. I've had different conversations with some of the board members who don't agree, who say it would be fine. You could have the tennis courts on the small portion of the property where they're designed. And I want to just remind the members of the board that a significant portion of this property is going to be retained for stormwater detention, and a botanic garden is a lovely compatible use with wetlands and other things. Some folks we've talked to have said, nope, those are incompatible, and that's not an outcome that's acceptable to the city. And at this time with the information that we have. And so we are continuing, and we may not reach agreement. And I think that's unfortunate, but our team continues to work too. And I see the emails that are written. I have participated in meetings. I will continue to participate in meetings to help this group come to a proposal that it can be considered. Again, we're not there at this point, but we'll keep trying.
One last just more acknowledgement from Yvonne Bennett, who spoke on the SBRC. In terms of ballot language, can you give us any insight on, I understand the concerns. The Reimagine South Boulder group is essentially saying, although I don't want to put words in their mouth, but what I'm hearing is we're nervous that we would go all out in the community, support the $400 million bond, and then it goes all to North or it goes to some other need in the community or facility need. And so we don't want to put a ton of effort into supporting the measure if we don't have some assurances that we're going to at least keep core amenities. So I very much appreciated what she was saying. I think that was an appropriate response. Personally, I think that's the right way to go about it. And I want to just acknowledge those comments. But is there something that we're doing to work with City Council on that ballot measure language to help the South Boulder community feel assured that we're going to be keeping core amenities if we rebuild completely?
I'll just note Yvonne shared that email with me. I don't remember if it was today or sometime this weekend. So I've not had a chance to follow up and talk to anyone on city council. The current ballot language that was approved on first reading last week said, legal language, that will allocate funding for projects, replace or renovate. And it says the South Boulder Recreation Center, including aquatics. And I've seen the draft language being requested wants even more specificity around core elements and stuff. That next reading of the ballot language is, I'm just looking at a calendar, is next Thursday, August 6th. And so I expect rapidly in the next couple of days, there will be a conversation, or it might be it might be something they deliberate in the meeting. I honestly just, Mondays are pretty packed. I've not had any conversations to unpack that yet.
And I was going to note, this item is on our agenda a little bit later on. So can we just table discussion till then? Is that okay with you, Ollie? Okay. All right. I want to echo what everyone said. We appreciate you all being here tonight and speaking to us. Thank you for sharing your Monday evening. Perhaps let's move on to the consent agenda. So that is on page 3 of our packets. I would love to have a motion to approve the minutes from June 22. Okay, there are 2 motions. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so does anyone have any questions, concerns, comments on last month's minutes? We'll start with you, Yvonne.
Not on the minutes, no. I do have, would like to talk about item D.
Okay, thank you. We do vote on this as a whole item, so let's move on to other things in the consent agenda. Yvonne, you brought up item D. Let's start there.
So at the last meeting, I had requested that we were hopefully going to receive an update on East Boulder Rec Center, specifically the status of the pool infrastructure. And in the table, I noticed that East Boulder Rec Center is talking about replacing pool filters, but can staff tell us where the project stands today in terms of rebuilding infrastructure for the pool? What phase are we in the pool planning? What major decisions have been made or remain outstanding?
Yeah, thank you for that. So tomorrow, I think I shared, I wasn't sure of the dates last meeting when we'd be able to give a better update on phase 2. I have a meeting with the facilities department, with the project consultants tomorrow. So we'll be able to answer all of those questions at the August meeting.
Okay. I'm sorry,
Yvonne,
I had one more question on
Sorry,
this.
Yvonne, let's do one question at a time.
Okay.
We'll come back to you.
Okay.
Michael?
This is going to be a little in the weeds, but thanks for the update on the detailed program catalog and the move to a quarterly marketing prospectus. I appreciated all of the data that you included with the Smart Rec implementation. It just shows that you're really taking a look, implementing something new, really looking at the data, understanding usage. So it makes total sense to then not create a detailed program catalog and more effectively use staff resources. So I was wondering, with the quarterly marketing prospectus, how is that distributed? Since it does seem like most people are using Smart Rec to understand what programs are available. So is there still a need to create a marketing prospectus? Can that be distributed through Smart Rec? Yeah.
Absolutely. My name is Jackson Haidt. I'm Senior Manager for our Business Services and Marketing team. Thank you for the compliments for the team. This was a lot of data-driven approach that looked both at our recreation management software, Smart Rec, as well as website utilization and then e-newsletters. So last week, we started the distribution of the printed materials. Pre-COVID, we were printing approximately 40,000 rec guides per quarter and distributing those via mail. We found that that was not very successful. So with this printed round, we have printed 1,500 copies. Those are being distributed across the 3 recreation centers. And then we are also sharing them at our 3 regional facilities, which is new for us. The intention behind that is to look at the cross-pollination and encourage users of one facility to check out other types of facilities. So if you're at the golf course, you may be interested in the Boulder Reservoir or the outdoor pools. With that, the Smart Rec software does have the ability to make all programs visible at a certain time. So we currently have the recreation guide go out via eBlast newsletter as the recreation programs are turned on. That's then visible to community members who are browsing through Smart Rec. We have QR codes at all of our recreation centers encouraging folks to sign up there. And then for those who aren't tech literate, we do have staff that can assist with registration at any of the 3 recreation centers or over phone calls as well.
Sounds great. And it is really good to see all of the usage, especially since this was rolled out recently.
I just wanted to say that I had the opportunity to attend the Bill Bauer and the Boulder Creek renaming celebration, both of which were wonderfully put on by Parks and Rec. I really appreciate it. Bill Bauer was very inspiring, and it's a beautiful installation. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Okay. Dana, anything on consent?
I just wanted to comment on the new registration system. I have to say, I was one of those people that really loved to get that paper copy of the catalog and browse through it and paperclip things and put little Post-its. But I did find when that was a little bit phased out and not mailed out to households and just made available at the rec centers, I found the online recreation guide actually difficult to use, and I am technology proficient. It was hard to maybe print out one page or even get a good view on one page. So I will be curious to see what the new online system offers in that regard. I do want to highlight one stat that is in this report, that the time spent on the new system is like 10 times the amount on the old. And that may not necessarily be due to ease of use, but rather the opposite, that it's taking somebody 10 times as long to actually find what they need to find. So I would just put that out there as a caution instead of a pat on the back, and maybe that's worth looking into further through online usage, other statistical data for online usage. The one other thing I wanted to...
sorry, Dana, we're doing one at a time. We'll go back to Yvonne. We'll come back to you, okay?
Okay. The last thing was just a question on the South Boulder Rec Center closure for almost a month. There's no explanation on why or what's going on for that length of time? Can you give us a little information on what's happening at South?
Yeah, Scott Schoenberg, Deputy Director. I will say that our facilities team, we pair with them to identify the types of maintenance that needs to occur and when contractors are available. There is some work that's going to be happening in the pool area there that is going to take a little bit longer than we originally anticipated. So that's why that closure is a little bit extended.
Or anything big like that? Like, can you
I
identify
believe
that?
there's some filter replacement, if I'm not mistaken, and some general maintenance items, but I'm not sure that there's leaks. I'll have to look into that and get back to you with more details.
I want us to double check on that. I wonder if there's a typo in this, because I'm not remembering the entire facility for South for 4 weeks. I think we
Yeah.
have a typo.
Because I asked people,
Yeah.
I was there today swimming,
Yeah.
and everybody was kind of surprised.
I think we have a typo.
Okay, that might explain then. Okay.
We will clarify and follow up probably first thing tomorrow, because we don't want folks to be confused, but I'm just looking at the dates.
Especially with North being closed.
Yeah,
and,
I think there's a typo here.
Okay, thank you.
It should be August 29th.
Thank you. That sounds right. South is having a typical 1 week closure. There might be a little bit longer for the pool, but I think maybe Scott, you were speaking to North. Yeah. There's a lot of facilities to keep straight, y'all, and lots of dates right now. And Scott was on top of the mountains all last week, and so the air's a little thick. He's getting used to it. I also just want to appreciate your grace. We're in an aging building. It has significant HVAC issues. It's a little toasty. Jackson was MacGyvering back there, and I think we have some airflow going, but I just appreciate everyone's, and thank you for letting me get some water.
I just wanted to make a comment on the Boulder Reservoir Days. I would have loved to actually have participated in that community event, but that email calendar invite didn't come out until the day before, and I thought it was further in the future and then kind of realized it after the fact. So more advance notice so we can attend some of those special Parks and Rec events would be great.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. I'll just note that I also got to attend the Bill Bauer dedication. It was really nice to be part of that. Congrats to all the city staff who helped to make that happen. It's nice to see you there, Jenny. Sorry I missed Boulder Creek. I was in a windowless room in Thornton learning about addiction therapy, so having a great night. Okay, let's move on. Okay, all in favor of, sorry, we still need a motion to consider the consent agenda. I think,
There was a
right?
motion.
We did.
Oh, no, yeah.
That was on minutes. Do we need a motion on consent agenda?
Somebody motions.
We need to approve the consent agenda.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. Okay, so I need a motion to approve the consent agenda. Thank you. Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to matters from the department.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll note that with your rapid assessment of the consent agenda, we're just 2 minutes off of our planned agenda, which is great because I
job,
know
everybody.
that gives us time to talk about the things that we brought forward. So just thank you all. Welcoming Jackson Hyde, our Senior Business Services Manager, and Stacy Hoffman, Senior Budget Analyst. They're going to join you for 2 items on this agenda. First, we know folks are paying attention at different levels to important council conversations, and we want to give you an overview of their discussions on the long-term financial strategy and the 2026 ballot measures. I want to preference this item and note that we are not members of City Council. So we'll do our best to answer questions, but if it gets into, council perceptions on things or whatever, we'll probably want to get back to you. And then they are going to roll into an overview on our fee policy, but let's start with the long-term financial strategy and 2026 ballot measures.
Hi, everyone. Jackson Height Business Services Manager. As Ali mentioned, we have 2 items for you tonight. So the first one is going to be focused on the long-term financial strategy and ballot measures. And then the second one will be focused on the fee policy. Because both of these items are related, we have the same 3 precursor slides for you that I just wanted to remind you on why we're talking about this. Looking at our 2022 BPR plan, there are 6 themes, and these 2 topics both address taking care of what we have and financial sustainability. Financial sustainability is the bigger emphasis tonight. So this is really ensuring that we align current resources with core services and community priorities. As a reminder on why we're talking about this and the PRAB's role on this, there's 2 sections in the charter that allows for the PRAB to make recommendations to City Council concerning expenditures or appropriation from the Permanent Park and Recreation Fund. And then the second one is related to reviewing the city manager's proposed budget, which, as Ali mentioned, will be released at the end of August. That budget will be reviewed with the entire PRAB at the September meeting, which coincides with the study session that City Council will have in mid-September, followed by the 2 public hearings that will occur in the month of October. So just so you're aware, as far as the suggested language that you will receive in September, there are 3 different action items that need to be recommended by the PRAB. They're listed up here and will be filled in with the actual dollar amounts associated with the operating budget, the Permanent Parks and Recreation Fund, and then the capital investment program. So all of these X's will be filled in at the meeting in September, but this is the second month that you have seen this ballot language that motion language, suggested action item. I don't want to confuse this with the ballot language. So this will be a suggested action item that the PRAB will be voting on in September. So with that, we are going to jump into the long-term financial strategy with an emphasis on the 2026 ballot measures. The 2026 ballot measures would occur at the November election. So at the June City Council meeting, City Council heard about Fund Our Future, which was the community engagement that looked at a variety of city services. And then there was also additional polling that occurred on 6 potential ballot measures, and City Council provided input on both the engagement results and then the potential ballot measures. I know that these graphics are very small. The top portion of the slide shows what the polling was. The left-hand column is 6 different ballot measures. The middle set of 3 numbers is how statistically valid community members who are likely voters responded to different survey questions before having additional information. And then the far right hand is an informed vote after more of the background information was shared on what the ballot measures meant and what it would fund. With this, the ballot or the statistically valid survey looked at different community priorities. And the consultant's key takeaway, and this was on slide 2 of the presentation, is that recreation centers and parks are the top infrastructure priorities. You can see the ranking in that bottom graph. The top one is recreation centers, and then the second one down is parks, playgrounds, and capital and refreshment of parks. So you can see that both of these received over 30% and do have a rather large significance weighting of all of the results. So with that, I'm going to talk about 3 of the potential ballot measures that were discussed by City Council back in June. One of them was for a recreation and safety bond for $400 million. This one had polled better than a bond for $200 million and included preliminary language on replacement of a South Boulder Recreation Center, renovation of the North Boulder Recreation Center, and a new public safety building. This would also require a charter amendment to modify the city's debt limit. So this one was advanced to explore further. One that did not advance was the expansion of the Permanent Parks and Recreation Fund. This would have expanded it for operations and maintenance. Currently, it can only be used for acquisition and capital improvements. The thought process here is that this ballot measure could return in the future, but based on the polling, there was not a desire to put it on the November ballot. And then there was also an intention by City Council to move forward with a residential vacancy excise tax. We aren't going to talk about this because there is no direct nexus to Parks and Recreation and your role as PRAB members. So within the Fund Our Future results, there was 8 different opportunities for in-person community engagement, and this included in-person, hybrid, and virtual online engagement. It was conducted in both English and Spanish, and this identified 25 different community services that residents or community members would recognize and asked them to prioritize how they would fund these programs through dot-ranked voting. Ultimately, all of the results were tabulated and a list of 25 different services was prioritized from 1 through 25 based on the participation in this Fund Our Future community engagement. Ultimately, there's 5 initiatives that are related back to Parks and Recreation, and you can see them listed up here. They are ranked in order that they appeared. The first is Safe and Managed Public Spaces. That is collaboration between the Utilities Department, Housing and Human Services, Parks and Recreation, and the Police Department to ensure that public spaces are accessible and focuses on the removal of encampments. At number 11 was Youth and Older Adult Indoor Recreation. This is really an emphasis on the recreation centers and serving priority populations who are identified in the 22 department plan. Age-well centers are technically coordinated between both Parks and Recreation and Housing and Human Services. We included these as one of the recommendations from the 2021 Facilities Master Plan is to look at the co-location of age well centers and recreation centers to encourage the lifelong health and wellness while maximizing the efficiency of our buildings. At number 13 was indoor aquatic programming. This really focuses on the community input that you hear about the need for lane spaces and access to swimming pools. And then the last ranked item for Parks and Recreation was Youth Services Initiative. This is our program that provides mobile recreation to manufactured home communities across Boulder, which is generally for lower income families that don't necessarily have the same access to recreation programs on a regular basis. So we take recreation programming to them. Ultimately, last Thursday, there was the first reading of proposed ballot measures that's occurred at the City Council meeting. On August 6th, there will be a second hearing, or second reading and public hearing of those proposed ballot measures. And then if needed, there would be a third reading on August 20th. August 27th is the final date for City Council to approve any ballot language to go into the Boulder County election packet. I'm sorry. That's the final date City Council can approve it. September 4th is the deadline to get everything to Boulder County to make sure that it's on the ballot. With that, we also just wanted to remind PRAB that there is a call out in the charter that public officials, public employees cannot use city resources, facilities, or equipment to support or oppose any political candidate or ballot measure. So what this means is as soon as a ballot measure is finalized, staff can provide information, but we are not going to be advocating for or against any proposed ballot measures. You can see that the Communications and Engagement Department is taking the lead on what that means as far as what the city is going to develop to share with community members, board members, and City Council. This will include a mix of web pages, project videos, and then talking points that can be shared with both staff and City Council. There was an earlier question as far as what the ballot measure included. We have included a screenshot of what went in the packet last Thursday to City Council. I want to call your attention to number 1 and number 2. Number 1 states the South Boulder Recreation Center, including aquatics amenities. And number 2 is the North Boulder Recreation Center, including aquatics amenities and improvements needed to co-locate West Agewell Senior Center. These are the 2 items within the proposed ballot language that really impact Parks and Recreation. As Ali mentioned earlier, there is a lot of legalese at the top, and then there are a lot of other potential projects that are identified within the ballot language. So that was a very quick overview of long-term financial strategy. I'm glad to take any questions.
And Jackson, just to clarify, if this became the final language, this is what we would see on our ballots in November or in October.
Yes, that's correct. Okay. This is what passed at first reading last Thursday, would go to the second reading on August 6th. And if any amendments are needed, it would continue until August 20th.
Okay. I'm sure we all have a lot of questions. I want to start with you, Jenny.
I watched the meeting on Thursday and this was just approved in consent, right? So nobody had any comments. No. Okay. Thank you.
I was curious about, there was a lot of numbers and survey results there. It seemed interesting to me that the 2 greatest funding things were Parks and Rec, but on the list of 20 or 25, there was only 5, with the top Parks and Rec thing being 4, which wasn't even really related to Parks and Rec. It was more of a police kind of situation. So is there, like, what's the reconciliation of those kind of, it seems like 2 different signals.
Correct. The first one was a statistically valid survey. So that's what the top half refers to. An outside consultant who specializes in ballot language polling conducted a statistically valid survey that went to approximately 400 community members. And that is likely voters who are likely to participate in the next election. They're then able to extrapolate that out to identify commonalities and percentages. Within this, the bottom half is a list of amenities that the consultant asked residents or likely voters as far as what would be a priority for them. This is very common to gauge interest on what the top community priorities are and help identify what ballot language is going to be. The list of 5 items here for Parks and Recreation, collectively, all city departments were asked to identify their public-facing services that are being delivered. Within that, we recognize that the city offers about 700 different unique programs or services to community members, that it would be impossible to do community engagement with all 700 of those. The Finance Department, Communications and Engagement, and City Manager's Office identified the top 25 community services that they wanted to ask community members to engage in. The difference here is this was not statistically valid. It was anyone who signed up and opted into the community engagement, but that's why the polling numbers are slightly different on the screen compared to the statistically valid voters.
Gotcha. I also noticed when I saw the slide again that the first thing was infrastructure. So this isn't necessarily infrastructure related, so that might have changed it. Thanks.
Yep.
Yeah, so I guess could we go back to the Reimagine South Boulder request for adjusted language? As I understand from Yvonne's testimony, what she's saying, if we could go back to that language where it says, I think, including aquatics, including aquatics amenities. I don't quite understand the process here. I understand that they have reached out to council about that, but is there something that we as a body want to do to support the Reimagine South Boulder community in getting just a little bit more comfort to support the measure?
I actually have a question for you, Yvonne. Kind of taking a look at like just, this ballot measure language. I feel like this is actually very clear in putting like South Boulder first and foremost. I mean, it's number 1 on the list of services. And it's also mentions including aquatics amenities. So I guess just, from your perspective, does that properly represent what Reimagine South Boulder is looking for?
I think what they're concerned is, what is aquatics? What does that mean? Does that mean a splash pad? Does that mean, a few lanes? Does it mean that they're going to get the 6 lanes that they're getting now? Does it mean they're going to get a field house in that soccer field right next to the outdoor volleyball courts? I mean, there's just like, to them, what I heard Yvonne say is, all we want is, we don't want anything, we're not asking for anything new above what we have today in the facility. And they have discomfort with a broad aquatics amenities. They want it to specifically say, and I think the reason I heard why they want the specifics of, we want 6 lanes, just like we have now. We want a weight room. We want some rooms like we have today for exercise classes. Just sort of the core things that we already have today is what they're saying. But the reason I hear them saying this is because when CCRS passed back in November, and I live in South Boulder, it's for transparency, but what they felt like the rug got pulled out from underneath them. They were told by, and I was there when they were told by council members who were running for office at the time, said, hey, vote for CCRS and we'll get you the South Boulder Rec Center. Guess what happened? The whole community rallied around the CCRS being approved, and nothing happened. No money went to South. And so they feel like they've been burned. And so they're basically saying, fantastic, we're so happy it's number 1, but we're not comfortable with that broad language. What if city council members change? What if we have, new priorities? What if we're like I don't know, there's just a lot of what ifs, and we want to trust but verify. And so what I heard Yvonne say in her testimony was, can we be more specific? Can we say we want a 6-lane pool just like we have now? We want our workout room. We want at least the same square footage for workout. So I think they're just feeling like, if you want us to go all in and rally the community to support this, we want specific language. That's what I'm hearing.
Okay, I think what we need is we need Yvonne to take on that challenge. Like if she wants to lobby the city council to adjust their language, then I hope that she will be. I'm sure she already is in touch with them to suggest that. I would expect that she's watching this meeting, but if she's not, would you be willing to carry that directive back to her? Okay. We can also, as the PRAB, decide, and I think we should stay focused on understanding this material and asking questions of Jackson and staff. And then when we get to the matters from PRAB portion of the agenda, that's where we can decide if we want to also send us a letter to city council to that effect. And that, we can decide to do that or not, but we can certainly talk about it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Why don't we hear from Michael? Michael, do you have any questions?
No.
Okay.
Bernie, if I can
I have a question for Jackson, but it's not on, it's more general. Is that okay? Yeah. So I just want to make or be clear on it. We can advocate for the ballot, correct? The just staff cannot advocate for it.
I anticipated this question, so I'm going to jump in because I talked to the city attorney, and you are also a public official. You just can't use city resources. So you can't have a meeting in the North Boulder Recreation Center and use that public facility to advocate. You could not do it in a park, but you're not paid. You don't have a city computer, right? There's a lot less opportunity for you to use city resources to advocate. So you certainly can, you just can't use city resources to do it.
Okay,
But how does that work with just using the South Boulder Rec Center to encourage support for this ballot measure?
That's advocacy. And so we've asked, can we do tours to educate people on the condition of the facilities? We cannot, because that's seen as advocacy. It's been challenged.
Yeah.
It's a really high risk, high exposure area for the city.
So there couldn't be an event organized by the public at South Boulder Rec Center.
The public is not a public official.
Okay.
But it could not use city, and so that's where it changes, right? So no city employee or city official can use city resources to advocate.
So we can't stand there as people are coming in to North Boulder Rec and say, hey, vote.
You can have one of those twirly signs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you cannot.
Thank you.
Oh, why not? If we're outside the facility.
You're in a city park. I think you're in a big gray area. That's a city resource.
Okay. So if we're on the sidewalk.
I mean.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Jenny, you had a question.
Can I just add one piece while we're there? The Play Foundation, our philanthropic nonprofit partner, voted at their last meeting that they are going to lead advocacy for this effort. And so if you have time and energy, that's where you can raise your hand and reach out.
I just wanted to mention to Yvonne that my suggestion would be the less that you ask for, the better. So if you wanted to say something like, when you relay this to Yvonne Bennett, something like a comparable facility, but going that deep into is going to immediately get shot down. So my suggestion would be, if you have maybe an attorney who's for the South Boulder Rec, you can run it past, just as simple as you can get. I think that they'd be more willing to approve a single sentence than they would to. Exactly, right. Versus bullet points. So just a suggestion.
Okay. Who else has questions for staff? Dana, do you think of any? No. Shannon, do you come with anything else? Okay. Kira?
Not a question for staff, but I did want to point out, reading some of the polling results, so how the public ranked whether these different population groups, whether the importance of providing programming for each was essential or very important. I love to see the fact that people with disabilities and people with low incomes were the two highest ranked in terms of being essential for providing programming. I know we talk a lot about, and we'll probably talk a lot when we mention the fee schedule, how that is an important priority for the department, those two goals. But it was nice to see that was also reflected in this statistically valid survey. So I think that's just sort of another way of looking at sort of the work that the department's doing, and seeing that those goals are also reflected when we reach out to the larger community.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions for staff? Okay, I have one. My understanding is that, well, sorry, let me rephrase that. Would I be correct to assume that all of these measures pulled below what would typically be our confidence line?
Yes, I pulled it up here. You can see that the yes vote in the purple column is my right here. Everything except for one pulled below 50%. You would generally want confidence polling above 50% if a simple majority is required. So yes, your assumption's accurate.
So what's the vibe in the city manager's office? Like, do they think this stuff can pass?
I think that we have heard for years, and we stated it in the 2014 department plan as well as the 2022 department plan, that without additional funding, we would be looking at a reduction in services. We have never asked the community if they would like to pay for these amenities. So this is an opportunity to ask the community if they would like to put their money where their mouth is and approve or deny these ballot measures.
But note that the ballot measure language is $32 million a year, which is roughly $400 to $500 a household.
I think that's extremely important framing.
Mhm.
And if we say anything publicly, we will certainly be including that.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions before we move on? No? Okay. So let's move on to the second part of this presentation.
Great. We aren't going to repeat the same 3 intro slides. We are continuing to talk about financial sustainability. And our focus now is on the fee policy and fee schedule. This is really related back to the 2027 budget development. So just as an overview on the fee policy, it was approved by PRAB in 2023. The fee policy is our guiding document when it comes to setting fees. All fees are not codified, but they go through a rule that's called the city manager rule. This is found in Boulder Revised Code section 838. And ultimately, there's about 15 days of public notice where community members can provide input on proposed fees after it's been published. And then the city manager can take any feedback that is received and make recommendations to that. Our intention with bringing the fee schedule forward next month in August is so that you can see proposed fees and how that is impacted in potential our revenue projections as you're approving or recommending the city manager's recommended budget in September. This, so the fee policy is really the guiding document. The fee schedule is how we set fees for the year. I'm going to call it a very extensive list of about 500 different menu items of the different services we provide. And that is the maximum price that we would charge. Ultimately, we may discount services from the fee schedule for discounts, promotions, if we're seeing declining usage. But by bringing forward a fee schedule, we are promoting transparency in what our fees will be for the next year. This will be shared with staff, it will be shared with community members, and there will be advanced signage put up in all of our recreation centers, in addition to email news blasts about potential rate changes. This slide just goes over our timeline. So in July, we are really just talking through the process with you and providing you an overview of what the fee policy is. Next month, we'll be coming to you with what the proposed fee adjustments are, and then any membership refinements. For those of you who were on PRAB last year, you'll recall that we did a major rehaul of our membership structure. Since about 2019, we have had the same price for all recreation facilities that is basically one price, gets you into all facilities, and any of our memberships were available for the 6 collective facilities. When I refer to the facilities, I'm talking about the 3 recreation centers, the 2 outdoor pools, and the Boulder Reservoir. With 2026 budget and implementation of the new Smart Rec software, we separated out the facilities, recognizing that there is a different cost to operate each of the facilities as well as different supply and demand. So whereas we used to have the same price across the board, there's now slightly different prices for each facility. You can get memberships that include all 6 facilities, or you can get a la carte memberships, or you can pay for a single visit. As I mentioned earlier, September is when PRAB will be taking a formal recommendation as part of the city manager's recommended budget. Sometime in Q4 following that is when the city manager rule will be published. That's the 15 days of public notice. And then we generally aim to have all new fees go into effect on January 1st. It's very easy to align with the calendar year. It lets us update prices, and setting fees on a calendar year basis makes a lot of sense. So just going over the fee policy, this was approved by PRAB in 2023. This graphic on the right-hand side really comes from the 22 department plan, and it identifies programs that are a community benefit the community has said taxes should pay for. Where the individual benefits, so if I'm going out and playing a round of golf by myself, that's where user fees are intended to cover the cost of providing those services. Ultimately, we have different guiding principles within the fee policy. There's what is the benefit-based pricing. So we refer to that as community, recreation, or individual, and everything in the fee policy has one of those categories that defines it. Back to Kira's point, we really do focus on equitable access, not just in this survey, but in the 22 department plan, as well as the 2014 master plan. It has been clear from the community that we are to prioritize any subsidy or tax dollars for people with disabilities, low incomes, and then age-based discounts for youth and seniors. And then finally, I already touched on it, but transparency, by having a fee schedule, it lists all of the fees we are going to charge over the course of a year. It provides it to community members, our user groups, and then individual participants in our programs. I know this is a lot of information. This is included in the fee policy. This identifies 10 different program types. So we categorized all of the different services Parks and Recreation provides into 10 program types. The second column is the benefit level. So that goes back to community, recreation, or individual. Cost recovery is basically, are we covering our direct expenses by earning enough revenue? So anything that is 100% plus means that we are covering full cost recovery there, and what in the private sector you would refer to as profit is actually reinvested back into those programs where we may not be able to meet full cost recovery. That ensures that we have equitable access and we are able to serve those priority populations already mentioned. And then I know that we offer a lot of different services. Our recreation guide is 48 pages, has a lot of information. We tried to include some examples so it could be relatable here. As far as what those cost recovery goals are for different types of programs that individuals may be interested in, since we know everyone participates in slightly different activities. So next month, you will see the fee review and pricing strategy. Within this, we try to ensure that the revenues we are going to generate through participation matches the expenses of providing the programs or services that are being provided. Ultimately, this is matching revenues and expenses and making sure that we aren't continuing to subsidize programs and aren't operating at a loss. There's several key considerations that go into how we set our fees. We have the service and financial analysis. So this is really looking at our database to see how are people participating. Are there programs that are not meeting minimum enrollment numbers? Are there programs that are growing at a faster rate than others? We look at the cost recovery across programs. We have a service delivery model that's intended to start, stop, or continue different programs. We recognize that all recreation programs have a life cycle. There's certain things that just lose traction over time. Gymnastics is something that spikes every year there's an Olympics and slowly declines until the next one. On the right-hand column, we talk about market and community factors. Within your packet, you'll see that a market rate study was done for what surrounding communities are charging for their services. This includes municipalities, it includes BVSD, it includes CU, as well as some private providers of recreation services. Ultimately, our intention is not to compete with other organizations or entities that are providing similar services, but we really try to complement and focus on the community recreation focused side of things. Finally, the fee policy as well as the department plan puts an emphasis on prioritizing resident rates over non-resident rates. The intention here is they are paying taxes that are supporting some of the subsidy dollars for providing programs. And then our frontline staff hears a lot of great feedback from our customers. We have hundreds of individuals going into our different facilities every day. So our front desk staff provides feedback on what's working and what's not working and what the pain points are from our various customers. So with 2027, our key focus is no changes to the fee policy itself. We do want to look at incremental increases to the fee schedule. The fee schedule is what's updated on an annual basis. And as I've mentioned multiple times, we are really trying to blend community access and making sure that our services are at a reasonable price that ensures maximum participation. In addition to the fees, I just want to call out, we do have the financial aid program. Currently, the financial aid program provides a 100% discount for anyone earning less than 60% of AMI, and that provides an annual membership that's valid through the end of the calendar year. And then we also offer $500 or 50% off up to $500 for individual programs if a individual wants to participate in a gymnastics class, a dance class, or a summer camp. So ultimately, our strategy is focused on equity, accessibility, affordability, and keeping it flexible. We're really focused on refining existing fee structures this year, simplifying the number of options, and improving the customer experience. And with that, that is the quick overview. Next month, we will have proposed fees in front of you. We will be highlighting the key areas where we are making changes to proposed fees, whether that's new fees, removal of fees, or areas that have over a 10% increase in fees from current fees.
Okay, thanks, Jackson. And I assume that when you come back to us next month, you'll have some data to support those decisions, right?
You have the market rate survey included in your packet this month. So that is really kind of us showing that we've already done the work. What we aren't going to do is our recreation database has participation rates across every program. We offer about 700 programs per quarter that we aren't going to share all of that with you. The intention is staff is analyzing it, looking at what it has low fill percentages, what types of programs or passes aren't commonly utilized. We will provide the data for that if it is a significant change, but it would be nearly impossible to do that for all 700 programs.
Okay, thanks. Michael, do you have any questions? No. Kira? Jenny?
Yes. Can you go back one slide? No changes to fee policy, but there will potentially be changes to the fees. The last year we did, and I'm looking right at Scott because he presented it last year, the big consolidation of, summer passes and all that new stuff. I know that some of that will probably be presented next month, but overall, do you feel like that was a successful endeavor?
I do. I feel like we knew the cost to operate the outdoor pools in the reservoir was significantly higher than the cost to operate the recreation centers. Dividing those out, and we had some really good data in advance to know how many people utilized multiple facilities. And so I think it's been extremely successful. We're currently looking at the numbers, and as we wrap up July, midway through the year here, and especially through the summer months, with knowing how we did with pool membership sales, we'll be able to make some strong recommendations here in August. But I feel it's been very successful.
Okay. And then last, do you have any idea of what percentage of the 700 different fees that you charge may be increased this year?
We've been going through them currently. I exaggerate slightly. I think we're at 500 unique fees that we're charging. Ultimately, with the fees that we've looked at so far, I would say about 25 to 30% are likely to be updated. Other fees, like our new membership structure, I think we're going to try and hold those prices as firm as possible, recognizing what a big change it was this year. But with that, anything that has a low utilization rate, we may phase out. As an example, we have an annual pass that currently has 6 members associated with it. Something like that, when we have over 3,000 members, may not make the most sense to continue offering on a recurring basis. That you could see phasing out of certain things, you could see the same rate. It's very unlikely we would decrease any rates, but we will flag the percentage change from current rates to proposed rates in a tabular format so it can be viewed.
I'm curious about the granularity of the cost recovery. Is that, because I can imagine, like, one of the things I'm curious about is if you can take advantage of a $1 rate in a really popular activity to get more cost recovery for something that you're not, you know, that, do you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, with our granularity of cost recovery, there's two ways to look at it. We generally lump everything together at a budget program level. So we treat the gymnastics program as a budget program. It is easier to look at that instead of this class on a Tuesday at 9 a.m. What is the fill rate? What is the cost of the instructor for that specific class? So we are looking at that across the board. Generally, I will say that the golf course currently operates at a cost recovery plus. We refer to that as it's meeting 100% cost recovery. So any additional dollars that are earned there are reinvested back into the programs. We have several programs that do operate at 100% cost recovery plus. They have high enrollment rates, high participation rates, year-over-year changes. That's an area where we may have more ability to increase fees, to reinvest elsewhere in the system. And that's something that you'll see was called out in the 22 department plan. Our intention is not to make a profit associated with any of our programs. We are reinvesting everything back into community recreation to ensure that it's accessible for as many people as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Can I offer just one caveat to something Jackson said? Typically, we like to increase facility access fees every 2 years. And we did do a major overhaul last year, and it wouldn't be nice to let that keep playing out. And I support that sentiment. And I want to remind the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board that in 2027, the minimum wage increases alone to the Recreation Activity Fund will be over $500,000. We have to fund those increases. We have to fund the increased cost of chemicals. And so I just wanted to hear that, like, that's not a commitment. We are, to Scott's point, we have the expense side of the equation done for the 27 budget. We don't have the revenue side yet because we have to let July play out. We make so much of our revenue in the summer months, and we're letting that new fee structure play out. The first 2 weeks of August, we'll be doing an even deeper dive on this fee structure. And so I can't promise what you're going to see in August, and I want to be careful that no one's mad at Jackson. We might show up with fee increases in August. We might have to.
I have quite a few questions. Okay. My first one is on resident versus non-resident, because I can't remember which slide, a comparison for facility entry fees actually has it being the same. So I'm wondering, to me, that seems counterintuitive, at least according to Appendix E. Whereby you'd want to have residents that pay taxes.
Dana
pay
Stacy
less.
Hoffman, Senior Budget Analyst. If you're referring to the market study comparison for 2026, we did get rid of the resident fee for our daily entry fees and just kept it at one rate. So that would be $15 currently.
Right. So what would be the logic behind that? Again, knowing that residents are actually paying taxes.
Yep. For 26, the intention behind this is any of our memberships, we do offer a resident and non-resident rate. The intention here is it's much easier to verify residency on a recurring membership where you have billing information associated with it. For someone who is just coming into a recreation center or an outdoor pool for the day, there is no ability for us to sit there and verify residency or non-residency for a one-time visit in a way that is efficient to prevent a buildup of lines. So the key shift that PRAB supported last year was for all of our single-use entries to have a flat rate. That also helps with transparency for advertising it, that if you're going to an outdoor pool, you know it is $15 if you're an adult, $32 if you're a household. We really encourage people to commit to lifelong health and wellness. So if they're willing to commit to that monthly or season or annual pass, that's when we offer the resident rate, which is a discount from the non-resident rate. With all of our recreation programs, so a gymnastics class, a swim class, All of those are a 15% discount from the non-resident rate for residents. So residents are essentially paying 15% less than a non-resident would. And that is just a global policy we have for all of our registered programs.
The minimum wage increase impacted parks alone $500,000?
Yes, that's just the Recreation Activity Fund. So collectively, we have about 200,000 hours of part-time employees who work for the department over the course of the year. As minimum wage has increased, when I started here in 2018, it was $10 an hour. We are currently at $16.52 an hour, I believe. And that's going up to the high 17s next year. So over half of our staff are paid within 50 cents of minimum wage. That as you see any impacts to minimum wage, this has been dramatic for the last 3 years. With Boulder's local minimum wage, it has increased 8% in 25, 26, and 27. Starting in 28, it will align with CPI for Boulder, Aurora, Denver, whatever the statistical area is, that will ease some of our impacts.
Yeah, actually, just for further clarification on the whole minimum wage impact, because I'm looking at page 124, where it shows what assumptions were considered as part of setting the fee structures. To me, those, I truthfully don't know what the minimum wage is in Boulder these days, but what I see on page 124 seems much higher than this.
Those are the rates
17
for
or-
special services tied to an event at the Boulder Reservoir or for ball fields. And so if you are doing it right, yes. So if you rent a ball field and need the field lined, those are the rates you'll be charged. Those are not done by non-standard employees making the minimum wage. They're paid by specialists across the department.
Yeah, but this first row says non-standard staff.
The reason these are above minimum wage is we load in the full cost of benefits. So in addition to the minimum wage pay rate, we are paying 3 different benefit line items that ultimately add up to about 18 to 19% of additional expenses.
Even for seasonal and temporary?
Correct.
Because that's a 10% increase, just according to the proposed 2026 hourly rate over.
And I want to clarify, the attachment you're
2025.
looking at is
That's
the
a lot.
25 to 26. So you'll see something very similar for the 26 to 27 proposed rates.
I have more questions. In Appendix E, it talks about proposed 2026 rates for fees. Is that actual or
Correct.
is-
What you're
was
seeing,
that just proposed back last year?
what you have in front of you is the recycled packet that was presented to PRAB in October of last year. The format that the approved fees comes out in is slightly harder to read, but while it says proposed fees, all of the fees in here were approved through the city manager rule in BRC 838.
In looking at the market assessment, it's pretty clear that Boulder's fees are significantly higher than other municipalities. I'm not going to count the athletic club or even the Y. Do we know what type of subsidy programs comparable municipalities along the Front Range? You know, the explanation in here was, well, based upon our priorities, the fees have been set this way versus maybe what Louisville offers, which could be 50%, right?
Yeah.
Can you maybe elaborate on what the focus is of some of these other municipalities? I can't imagine that it's significantly different.
I think the difference that you see is every municipality is funded slightly different. In Boulder, we have the dedicated sales tax, the dedicated permanent parks and recreation improvement fund tax as well. When it comes to recreation activity fees, different communities decide on how to prioritize these and subsidize them in different ways. Denver is a great example where voters approved a ballot measure that provides free access for all seniors and youth. That is something that's paid for by voters by a dedicated tax that was approved. It is very hard to do a true apples to apples comparison across different municipalities because everyone funds recreation slightly different. Ultimately, when we have a $500 million city budget, it's somewhat of a competition of different priorities. You can't afford everything as nice as it would be. That the subsidy that is provided is what we work within. But as a result, some of our fees are significantly higher than surrounding municipalities. That ultimately we are trying to balance the revenues and expenses here. And the two ways we can do that are through changes in fees or changes in volume of programs participation that we see.
Thanks. And then my last question is regarding transparency to the organizations that are actually cost recovery plus. And the organization I'm thinking of is the rowing group at the Res, where they really expressed concerns over what they consider to be very high fees. And I know the Res has a unique structure in terms of what it offers for like motorboats that can go above a certain speed and stuff like that, which might be attractive. But I'm wondering what is being done to increase the transparency for some of these organizations on why they're seeing the fees that they're seeing, because it seemed like the individual that talked during the public period 2 months ago or last month from the rowing group, it wasn't clear to him why, considering maybe they're the only group there at 5 a.m., they're paying this versus that. I don't know. It just seemed like there was a lack of transparency. And I'm wondering what the city is doing in terms of helping to communicate to those cost recovery plus organizations.
I'm happy to take that. For Boulder Rowing specifically, because they are at the facility prior to facility hours, they are expected to pay for 100% of cost recovery. So we are not generating a profit off of that. We are not subsidizing that service because there is individual benefit. What we have done with BCR specifically is we have provided our calculations and methodologies to them for the past 3 years that breaks down what our exact expenses are on a per operating hour. We have backed out certain things that are amenities that aren't necessarily available during those pre-hours when the facility is not entirely open. But the reason that they are paying the rate is that is the rate it costs to operate that facility on a per hour basis. That has been shared with them in multiple different meetings. We don't necessarily do this for every single user group. I think justifying the methodology behind it is very reactive, that the intention behind having the fee schedule and advanced communication is oftentimes folks are registering for new seasons, new programs in the summer or fall, that by us giving advanced notice on potential fee increases, it allows those organizations to communicate with their members or their participants to better inform what their budgets look like as well.
And I just want to add on that point, I think an important point with the Boulder Rowing Club is they've also been provided with the pathway to pay less, which is just to be at the reservoir when it's open. And they've opted to prefer to be there early in the morning. And, I think we all here probably, I'm assuming, but I think we all wish that all rec could be free all the time and plentiful. And that sadly is just not the reality.
Yeah, that's not where I was going with that. My concern more was with transparency, not just in putting together a fee schedule, right? But for those that really are cost recovery plus, how much are we communicating to them in details? For example, the difference between before hours and during hours and why that's different, right? To me, not my choice. I'm glad they were given the choice. And it's not specifically about rowing, but just that level of detail and transparency. I don't know what's being communicated to those types of groups, whether it's gymnastics or rowing or the sailing club, community. Just overall transparency in terms of how that fee is established.
I'd love to just offer, and it goes to another one. It's just hard to equate a lack of understanding with a lack of effort, because I'm very aware of, Boulder Community Rowing, like so many of the amazing sports institutions in our town, is volunteer led and volunteer run. And I can think of time when I was deputy director, and I know Scott now in that role of oversight, hours spent with folks walking through. And Dana, perhaps at one of your next one-on-ones, we could show you the PowerPoint that we've given to the rowers. I don't think here it's a lack of understanding. I think it's a lack of agreement. They don't believe that they should be passed along these fees that include the support of the entire facility, for the restroom, for the administration. They think they're just on the water. They should just pay for the folks that they see. And they don't agree that they should contribute to the cost of operating the entire facility.
Okay, so that concludes that portion of the agenda. Thanks, everyone. Let me just reorient here. Okay, so we don't have any action items this evening. Oh, sorry, we're way past that. Okay, we're on to matters from the board. No, we're not. CIP tour. That's you, Allie?
Yes, that is us. So to the new members of the PRAB, about once a year, we like to get you in the field and we like to walk through upcoming CIP projects. And so this is item C under matters from the department. And there's an attachment that shows you, well, I don't see it. Yeah, it's listed at the very bottom of this, maybe. Yes, is last year's tour itinerary. So you could see what that looked like. For this year, our proposed tours, we would love to actually just spend some time downtown with you. We would love to walk through Boulder Creek Park with you and show you the latest designs. We would love to walk the Pearl Street Mall and talk about its condition and the planned improvements in advance of next year's 50th anniversary. And then we'll also walk through Barker Park and show you that. And so this is a live item because we've done this a couple of different ways in the past. We have substituted it for a PRAB meeting. Your agenda doesn't really allow for that this fall. You're very busy. And so we can't substitute a meeting for the CIP tour. Some years we've done it in advance of the PRAB meeting. That makes for a very long afternoon and evening together. What we did last year that worked really well is we did it on a Friday morning and we spent a couple of hours together. So we would love to get your input on manner and scheduling of the CIP tour. And then we can work on getting a doodle pull out to you on days. So I guess first question is, would the PRAB like a CIP tour this year? Question 2 would be, do you agree on the list of projects that this downtown makes sense? And then third, if you could give us input on time and manner.
Well, I'd like to say that I would love to go forward with the CIP tour. It's been very helpful every year. For me, Friday mornings works well. I don't want to speak for anyone else on the board. And I think these 3 projects make sense given our current priorities. Okay, that's my take. Jenny, what's your take? This is on page 18. No.
Where's the page with the 3?
18. And the 3 projects are the Boulder Creek Park, Pearl Street Mall, and Barker Park. Kara, do you have any thoughts?
I loved the tour last year. I thought it was great. There's something about like being in the space and then hearing about it at the same time, which was very helpful. I think even we talked about like the ditch, which was just one of those things that's like harder to really wrap your head around until you're standing right there and you're like, oh, this is like the one spot that we're talking about. So yeah, I think that's great. Would love to do it again. Fridays are definitely better for me than other days. I would love a Friday afternoon, but I'm open. And I think those are the 3 sites for the tour. Makes sense.
Michael?
like Kira, I found the tour to be a lot of fun last year, and I thought it was really informative. I really appreciate the opportunity to go with staff too and get their input and get, the benefit of their knowledge from as to what we're seeing and it really helped me understand what we're doing here. So definitely down for again this year, and I'm pretty flexible except for the last 10 days of September, and any day works for me pretty much because I'm retired. So
I'm good with any day. If Fridays are actually good for me, Friday mornings, but whatever.
Dana Channing, I know that this is all new to you. Do you have any questions about what we're talking about before we, well, any or
No,
comments?
no questions. I'm interested in a CIP tour. Mondays are bad for me.
Yeah, I'm most definitely interested, and any day works. Friday mornings are fine.
Why Barker?
It's going to be our first permanent nature playground. And so that'll actually be under construction at some point this fall. You all have seen the concept. We think it's actually a great example of where parks can be integrated and experienced downtown. But to walk through it, I'm curious who's been to Barker Park?
I've been there.
Yeah, folks walk by it all the
Yeah.
time. And I mean, it'd just be a good one to see in person and feel since we're downtown.
The only one I would be interested in seeing, only project I would be interested in seeing that's not on the list is Tom Watson. So that would just be the other one I would consider because it's such a big, high profile project and people tend not to be able to get up that way. But other than that, I like the ones you've chosen, and Friday mornings work fine to me.
Can I note on Tom Watson that we are finalizing details with Boco Pickleball on a concrete pouring celebration for that project that we would love to see you all at. And so we certainly could give project overviews as part of that.
Great, that would be good. Perfect, thank you.
I like that. I like that this CIP tour could be a walking tour instead of a van tour, which would be nice. Okay, so I heard Kira say Friday afternoon. You might be the only one. Is mornings? Okay, are mornings generally preferable for the board? Okay, so maybe could you circulate some potential Fridays?
I'll get with our team and make sure our project managers are available, and I'll send around 2 or 3 options. I'll probably, we're going to do the morning, so I guess we don't need to wait for the heat to subside, but we'll send out a couple of options. It probably will be September, October.
Okay. All right, thanks. Okay, so we can move on to follow up on liaison timelines and roles.
Yep, this item probably isn't even 5 minutes. I think Dana had asked about timelines either at May or June, and we just wanted to follow up and make sure we were really clear with folks on the timeline of when you expect to be contacted for your liaison role for those projects that had a liaison for 26. And if anyone has questions, just let me know.
Does anyone have questions on this? Dana?
I don't have a question except for I think what Mike signed up for sounds really interesting, and I'm wondering if I have to go to the page. And if maybe I could not be the board liaison, but just kind of sit in on. It was Q4.
You're wondering if there can be 2 liaisons for the park system plan?
Well,
or
I'm not
just
saying I need to be a liaison, but it would be great learning, I think. And I don't know how often it comes up to maybe attend some of those conversations that Mike's going to be.
In the past, we've had 2 liaisons on certain projects. That's a big one. I think. Do you have any objections, Michael?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I think then if it's okay with you, Allie, I'd love for Dana to be involved in that as well.
Let me check in. Mark Davison is our senior planning manager, and he is about to be out of town. Let me follow up with him to make sure I'm not missing something. But it is a large plan that's going to lead into the next department plan update, folks. It's on the radar. It's coming. We're going to be talking about the next department plan. So it does make. I agree that 2 would make a lot of sense. I don't know everything, and I want to make sure I'm not missing something.
Any other questions or comments on the liaison roles? Okay.
Okay, I was just going to say, I was gonna save it for Prab Matters, but I had a great meeting in my liaison role with Jackson and Stacy, and we went over, that was on July 15th, and we went over 4 of the documents that were included in the materials for this meeting, including the Blue Ribbon Commission report and the white paper, and it was a very informative session. And Jackson and Stacy answered questions that I had at that point. So just wanted to provide that little
Great.
tidbit.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments? No? Okay, let's keep rolling. I think now we're up to matters from the board. Okay, so we spoke earlier this evening about what the city council's up to, which is considering ballot language. We have an opportunity, if we want, to engage with that process by making our recommendations as a body to the council. Of course, that's not actionable. That's strictly something we would do in an advisory capacity. Yvonne, this seems like something you would like us to do. So why don't you tell us more?
Yeah. I mean, given the numbers, when, Jackson was talking about the, 40-something% sentiment, we're really close. It's going to be a tough one, I think. And I think we all want this to pass so that we can invest in our community. But I also think we really should, I would like to see us write a letter to council aligned with Reimagine South Boulder, if we can come to some agreement. And it's a really tight timeline, right? So somebody would have to draft a letter, get everybody's agreement on whatever language that would align with Reimagine, and get something out. I'm happy to lead on that and draft something and circulate it and see if people are good with that and meet with Reimagine. But I do think that because it's such a tight potential loss, if we don't have, they have 4,000 members in Reimagine, and that doesn't include the entire Table Mesa community. So I think they have a lot of sway, a lot of influence, and I think we want them to be out knocking on doors, supporting the measure, and we want, to hopefully get this thing approved. But anyway, that would be my hope, is maybe we could write something and agree to send something to council.
Okay, I guess this is a little bit of a nebulous conversation, but I'd love to hear if anyone on the board has any reactions to Yvonne's position that we ought to write a letter. Channing?
Yeah, I'm questioning. I don't think, I think it would be a mistake to let the desire to have a perfectly foolproof ballot issue get in the way of, because I've certainly never seen a ballot issue that specified how many lanes of a pool would be funded by a tax measure. And honestly, I'm kind of surprised that they even say aquatic amenities, that they just don't say South Boulder Rec. And so I would ask people to question, ask themselves, will adding more specific language even be considered by council? And if it's not there, isn't it kind of foolish just to abandon support for the measure just because you didn't get the exact wording you want?
Yeah, I'm just nodding in agreement to what Channing is saying. I think it's a little odd to me that out of the 6 things or whatever are listed there on the ballot measure, you would treat South Boulder Rec in such specific detail and not be consistent across all of the facilities being included.
Jenny? Sure.
Yeah, I kind of agree. Also, it mentions like Penfield Tate and it doesn't even say like what we would be doing with this building. So I feel like the specificity for South Boulder is actually like very much there. And I think we need to really quickly turn to, okay, this isn't polling well so far. This is the chance to get the South Boulder Rec Center funded. We need to like come together, give this the best shot we possibly have to get this community support around this ballot measure. And if it does not pass, that's going to be a huge blow to Reimagine South Boulder. So I think whatever we can do to maybe move past like the specifics of language around in the ballot measure and move more towards like what's our plan from now till November, to just give it the best shot we possibly can.
I mean, I think,
Sorry,
oh, sorry.
Let's let everyone have a chance. Yeah, Michael, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said so far. My concern would be, given that it's so tight in the public polling, that if we advocate for more specifics and the language is changed to be more specific with South Boulder Rec, as opposed to all the other kind of items on there, that we're damaging the potential for it to be passed. And that's my concern.
I was going to say the same thing. And Yvonne, I think you're going to tell us that like this group is going to not support this measure. And okay, all right, I won't speak for you. Go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, I mean, we heard what Yvonne said, and it was very specific. What I'm thinking is I could go back to Reimagine and say what you all shared, that's too specific, but potentially we could agree that it on language that could say substantially equivalent to the core amenities that currently exist, or whatever that language could be. It doesn't have to define necessarily 6 lanes, weight room, et cetera. But you've got to remember, or we need to remember, that literally last November they were promised, and the whole community rallied around this promise. If you vote for the CCRS, you're going to get SBRC redone. That's your money. So vote for it.
I think that's
so that happened.
The existing ballot measures for CCRS, South Boulder Recreation Center was not called out specifically in the ballot.
It was not. You're right.
Yeah.
But
so this time, South Boulder Rec is specifically called out in the ballot measure.
Right. But in meetings we had in the neighborhood, Councilmember Wallach, for example, said to the community, vote for the CCRS and you'll get or at least you'll have a better chance of getting this.
I think it's really important if we can communicate with Reimagine South Boulder that sorry for some of the things that happened in the past. This time is different. This time South Boulder is in the ballot. And so we absolutely need their support.
But remember, this is a 5-year timeline, as I understand, Allie. We're talking about the council that exists today may not be there, right? So even if council is supportive of South Boulder Rec Center being rebuilt with the core amenities they have today, in 5 years' time, or whatever timeline we're talking about, that could change and could be different sentiment, and there could be different priorities. And so I'm just conveying what I hear in the community is the community says, we don't trust, this is a huge debt burden that you are putting on top of us. We already voted for it for CCRS. You told us we were going to get South Boulder or some of it, at least some of that money would go to South Boulder Rec rebuild. None of it went to it. And in fact, now you're saying we need 400 million more. And so we don't know if we want to spend 400 million and have our taxes go up, et cetera. Anyway, I'm just conveying that is what I hear in the community. And I would like to see the community say, all right,
Okay, I think I'd like to poll the board, and this is like non-binding, I'm strictly for my own straw poll, if you will. Who among us is happy with the language as we saw it? If you are happy, raise your hand. Okay, so in light of that, Yvonne, I think we're going to pass on this. That said, I do think we ought to have a conversation about I think that this ballot should be approved by the voters. And maybe if you agree with me, we can have a conversation about how we might support that. We don't have to do that right now. It's late and that vote is a long way away. But I would love for you all to take that away from this meeting and think about it. And we, the PRAB, do have some influence over this community. As we've discussed before, we've been effective at lobbying for what we believe in, including the CCRX tax, which I'm sorry if the people of this group felt misled, but we needed that for other projects that are very important. And it's very good that it was passed for the benefit of the entire city. So we should continue to step into that role and to lead the political conversations in the city when we agree with the measures being taken. Okay, any other thoughts on that language, Channing?
Yeah, I agree about like taking away the idea of how we might promote this. And one idea I'd like to plant in people's heads is, even though we're the Parks and Rec Advisory Board, there's also an angle that this ballot measure is fundamental to Boulder Police Department, to Fire Department, to other things. And so while we probably want to lead with Parks and Rec because that's our bailiwick, I think it can't hurt to emphasize that it's not just Parks and Rec. There's other fundamental parts of the city that need this money.
There's a lot of really good public stuff wrapped up in this ballot measure. Other thoughts, Jenny?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that we should take a stance on the whole as a board, whether that be an op-ed or a letter to city council or something like that that just says we're in support of this. And I do want to recognize for Yvonne, there is a little difference between North and South Boulder, because South Boulder, they're talking about replacing, and North Boulder, they're talking about renovating. So that is a little scarier. So I just wanted to, empathize with that, because you don't know what's going to happen with that. So I understand where you're coming from, looking for more specific language on that. And I do think that your group should, or the group should, request something more specific. But again, if they do it for South, I think they should make that change for North also, just so it is, if it's rec center conversation, it should match. It's just what else I would say to that. So I struggle.
So you're saying Reimagine should work with,
If they're going to go, I mean, I would just say if they're planning on going to ask, for more specifics. But if they're going to say something for South, I would recommend just matching North. Like we had mentioned before, like it should be, thank you. It should be consistent throughout the ballot measure language. So if you're going to say comparable for South, you should probably just say comparable for North, just to make it look equitable.
but how would Reimagine know what North needs? Because they're only
Well, you're
interested
just
in South.
proposing as a special interest group, you're proposing change to the language.
So would they get North Boulder advocates to be involved in that? Because
I don't
I don't know if they know the scope of work.
I just when she was talking about it being consistent, that made me think,
Okay,
if it is consistent throughout, you might have more luck with that.
gotcha.
Yeah.
So it's consistent now.
Right. It's exactly the same language for the rec center part of it.
It's the aquatics
Yeah.
amenities.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think just from a legal standpoint, what does aquatics mean? What is an aquatics amenity? It can mean a splash pad.
Right.
I mean, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like budgets change, priorities change.
Yeah.
So again, I think there's just no legal definition of what
Mhm.
aquatics is. It doesn't necessarily, it could mean a small leisure pool. It doesn't necessarily mean lanes, swim lanes.
I think there's other language that can be applied
To both.
to both.
Yep.
That is.
Right, so
But
if-
overall, I
that
just think,
shows overall fairness.
Yeah.
and-
I just think we should, as a board, talk about something, and we don't have to do it right now because we're talking about November. So as a board, we should promote the ballot language. We should do something in support. But again, putting it in your mind, I just don't know what that is yet. But I agree that we should do something.
But are you saying do something before the final ballot
At the
language?
end of
or
however, if it looks
Oh.
like it does now, I'm happy. If
Oh,
you guys
okay.
get changes in, I'm happy. I like it. I think we should promote it as a board, however it ends up.
It's hard to imagine changes to this ballot language that would get to a place where we wouldn't be supportive of it, I
Right.
think. And while, like clearly the sentiment was to not suggest changes, if SBRC wants to go back to city council and say, we think aquatics should be more specific in SBRC, I think the suggestion is just make that same suggestion for North Boulder as well.
But
just to the language.
But for North, I don't remember what the language said. It was,
Renovating the north, yeah, renovating the North Boulder.
but right, back to Jenny is renovating. It's not
Well,
like
actually, the
tearing
ballot
it
language
down.
says Renovate or replace, and then it says, it lists the rec centers, yeah, including, and then it lists the rec centers, and just says including aquatics. So it actually, it's just, Jackson's language originally said, when he put his bullet points up, it said renovate north and replace south. It didn't call it out that specific. Oh, it did not call it out that specifically in the ballot measure language. So I'm kind of leaning on Jackson's language a little bit
The
more.
the ballot language does say.
It says-
Replacing of the South Boulder Rec Center, including aquatic amenities, renovating the
Okay.
North Boulder Rec
All right.
Center, including aquatic amenities and improvements needed to co-locate West Age Well Senior Center.
Okay.
That's the actual language.
That's what it says. Okay.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. Let's put that aside for the moment and let's be getting pumped for November and October. Okay. So that brings us to, Dana, do you have a thought?
Well, I was just coming back to promoting it, getting the bond measure passed. I think that's really critical for both rec centers, not just one, and the safety. I don't know what it was called, the new safety building. I think it's really important that we not wait too long in terms of starting our activities or efforts to really engage all neighborhood communities, whether it be that of North Boulder or South Boulder, to support this ballot initiative. And what can we do?
I definitely
in that
agree.
way.
And I think we can put this item on our August agenda to check in on it then. We'll have a second read on the language by that time. And we can, yeah, by the second read may not be final, but it'll be closer and we can discuss then what we may want to do or not do.
One moment. At the August meeting, the ballot language will be final and you will not be able to use this room to talk about advocating for a ballot measure. It is a city resource. And so you don't need to have the conversation now, but you'll want to figure out how to convene and coordinate that doesn't use city resources.
Okay. Thank you for pointing that out. How come we were allowed to use this room and these meetings to talk about letters that we wrote on behalf of the CIP?
It's not a ballot measure.
Not a ballot measure.
So, and I just wanted for any public listening, for everyone, we are in a council manager form of government. We are the implementers of policy. Our job is to implement whatever policy is passed, whether it's for or against. And it's a code of ethics issues that city staff, city resources are to be neutral when it comes to matter entrusted with the public.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I said CIP, I meant CCRS, that was a ballot measure, yes.
I don't remember you all taking a position on that.
Yeah, and we certainly used time to talk about it. We wrote a letter.
To advocate for CCRS? Before the ballot language was final.
Yeah.
Before the ballot language was final.
Okay.
I think it.
I might not have been paying close attention last year. We're talking a lot about it because it is going to take incredible advocacy and education. I'm not remembering what happened last year around advocacy.
I mean, I hope that we're all not just admitting to violating the code of ethics right now.
I have a feeling you're not going to charter jail, but because we know this bond measure is going to take, it is going, someone asked earlier, what is the mood? And I tell you, like, the mood is determined, right? It is going to take incredible effort and we want to do what we can to help support education. But the line is very clear on advocacy. And I probably missed advising you last year if it was after the measure was final on the ballot language.
It was in September. So, okay. All right. Well, now we know. Okay. Let's do this.
So can we communicate via email? That's still city resources, right? Like, I mean,
you all don't have city email or city computers.
But
but
we
we still
can't-
can't have 5 of us on an email to talk about city business.
No, I mean, yeah, you're gonna happy hour at Mike's house. I don't know. I mean, there's lots of ways that folks figure out.
Okay, so
That's
I think what we should do.
Oh, but it
is-
can't be more than
It can't be more than 2.
can't be more than 2 of you.
Right, yeah, exactly.
If one of you wants to, I know the city attorney would be happy to give you direct guidance. She is an attorney. I'm just pretending to help you right now and keep you all in line. And so if you wanted to connect with Teresa to get better guidance, I'm sure she'd be happy to talk to
Okay,
a
I'll
representative.
do that,
Okay.
and I will distribute that information on a 1-to-1 basis,
Okay.
or perhaps
Well,
1
it's
to
not
2.
written yet.
It's not final yet.
Just people can't respond to it or reply to it.
I'll ask her that too. But I think that what we can do it right now in this moment is say, do we want to assign someone to draft a letter in support of this, laying out some of the reasoning why, which we can then. Yeah, but then we still wouldn't be able to vote to send it. Okay.
If you're trying to figure out how you could lobby or get information to council before their August 6th meeting, it is going to be very hard for you
No,
all
I'm
to
thinking more
finalize.
about how can we write an op-ed
Right. Oh,
Before November.
Oh.
before in October sometime
Yeah,
probably.
got it.
So like, can we? Okay, is there one among us who would love to volunteer to write a letter on our behalf? We're not agreeing to send it yet. We just want to draft something to have it ready. That would kind of encapsulate why we think supporting this funding is important. This feels like a Michael project.
You said you were retired.
Happy hour
Yeah.
and a letter. Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Okay.
first cut.
Okay, and just know that like we likely will need to edit it once we see the final language, and then I will figure out with Teresa how we can give ourselves permission to send that to the Daily Camera as a body, if we all agree. So there's 2 questions: how do we agree without being able to meet?
I think the last one I saw.
No, I like the duo.
Yeah, there you go.
Then we can do 3 of them.
Yeah.
I guess my question is, it's going to be public information. You're writing an op-ed that's going into the Daily Camera. So what does it matter if it's only 2 people or the whole advisory board? Because it's still totally open in terms of public.
I think the snafu is that we have to vote to send the letter, but we can't vote in this building to send the letter because then that would be.
And we
whatever.
can't convene to vote.
Right, well, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
Can't we vote?
Apparently in violation.
It's
That's
still,
what we just learned.
we have to copy the.
Well,
No, we can't vote electronically. Anything that we do with the body has to be done in a public forum.
So I think rather than speculate about it, we get the
Yeah,
information.
let's get
from the
information.
beginning, and we can do it or we can't do it.
Yeah, and we'll find out. And if we can't do it, then if we choose, you can do it in pairs or individually.
Singly or
Yeah.
whatever.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you all for coming with us on that journey. Martin Luther.
Yes, yeah.
Give you a thumbs up.
It'll be like Martin Luther.
Yeah.
We'll go be under a rock on my front porch and pick it up and take it with you.
Okay, last thing on the agenda tonight is public Pride Matters. Does anyone have any Pride Matters they'd like to share? Jenny?
Earlier, we kind of breezed through future board and tours, and I wanted to mention I've received a number of emails from the golfing community at Flatirons, which I did send a response, and I had it, and I had a response back from staff. So thank you for that. With that in mind, I'm still a little bit concerned with some of the issues that the ladies leagues are dealing with at Flatirons. Kind of near and dear to my heart, golf in general. So I'm feeling the pain that these ladies have got going on. I was wondering if that was, and I would like to, just here and with everybody, I would like to add that golf course. And I mean, since I've been here, I'm on 2.5 years, I've never had a Flatirons update. So I was hoping maybe we could add it to a future agenda item. Specifically with the ladies, you know, some of the things that they're dealing with, there's a $5 fee that they're being charged for holding tea times, and the course is only taking it in cash, and they don't understand why it's happening. I've never heard of it happening. This extra fee, and then driving range privileges and just some mowing and some things like that. And so I, you know, as a woman, have dealt with that in the past. And so I'm just trying to advocate for the ladies league at Flatirons.
Sure, we'd be happy to do a presentation with the golf course. The other thing that we are working on right now is an operational plan and a business plan for the golf course. And it is a fine balance between filling our tee sheets. They are full. There's a lot of demand for golf, and those tee times fill up very quickly. I will say that the course is not collecting cash only for the $5 fee is actually a early booking fee to reserve their block of time. And so those individuals in the group pool their cash, their money, and then pay the course. So there's a lot of ways we can look at that. And we certainly want people to be able to walk, and we want people to enjoy the course and focus on the wellness and align with our BPR plan. So I'd be happy to work with David DiMartino and my team to come in and do a presentation.
Okay, that would be wonderful. Thank you. And then on behalf of Lynn Siegel, she had emailed all of us and texted during the meeting that the chat is usually open on it during the meetings. I don't know what that is, so I just wanted to ask.
She's referring to the Zoom chat, and we've had it not available for over a year.
Okay, so that's standard procedure
for us. Yeah.
Okay, great. That's why I wanted to clarify that for her. And then again, Prab Matters, thank you for that blue ribbon study. That was really amazing to read. And it's just a little, not ironic, but when you look back at that was 20 years ago, they were dealing with the same issues as we're dealing with today. So I just found it to be very enlightening. So thank you very much for including that. It was a fascinating read. And then as far as things that I've done for Prab over the last little while, play golf outing, don't forget to register or come or volunteer on September. It's on September 11th. It's going to be a great outing at Flatirons. And then Bill Bauer and the wonderful event with the ice cream at Boulder Creek Park. I almost called it Civic Center. So it is not that, but it was a great event. Thank you.
We're all fighting with that. I've started a dollar jar that
I like it. Okay, that's all for me.
When I came over to the Parks and Rec building for my meeting with Jackson and Stacy, I had the opportunity to meet two of our Parks and Rec rangers who were in the office because they're headquartered there. And I really appreciated that, as well as seeing some of them in action when I was dropping off my daughter at Scotty with regards to watching two of them actually check out the bathroom while I was dropping my kid off, and really liked seeing them in action, especially after seeing people hanging out in that location and knowing that, just watching expressions on people's faces and their reactions to being a little nervous, to the group that was kind of accumulated there. And I was happy to see those rangers doing their thing. So thanks.
I was at Tube to Work Day. It's an awesome event. I was not in the water. Kira and I had a nice coffee with Kirk Fernhofer. He's going to be speaking to us next month about Boulder's unhoused population and the services that the city has for that group, along with a couple other people. I learned a lot. I think you learned a lot. Yeah. So looking forward to hearing more from Kurt next month. Yeah, the event at thank you. It's so late. The event at Bill Bauer was really nice. Thank you, Allie, for putting that together. And it was great to see what we can do with a community partner like that who's so engaged. Got one more? Okay.
I was curious what work was being done at South Boulder Rec near the sand volleyball courts, because there was some fencing that was up for several weeks and just came down. It was kind of nice to see it down, and
Yep, we had
haven't really
a
seen anything.
Drainage sewage improvement that our facilities team coordinated. So it did have restricted access to the courts, and so we communicated with BOCO and BTA on court access. It didn't actually impact inside the facility at all, just around the perimeter of the building.
Okay. I think that's everything. So thanks all. We're adjourned. We'll see you next month.
Thank you.